Hello, hello.
Hello.
Narmada Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sannidhi Guru. যে নদীর জলে স্নিগ্ধ পৃথিবী সিদ্ধ মাটির বুক, যে নদীর পলি গড়েছে বদ্বীপ লাঙলের সভ্যতা, যে নদীর জল করেছে আমায় দেহ মনে ভাটিয়াল, সেই নদী মাতা প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম। সেই নদী মাতা প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম। যে নদী আমার ঘর ভেঙেছে ঢেউে ঢেউে উত্তাল, সে ঢেউয়ের ফনায় ভাষায় আবার সাহসের সম্পান। যে নদীর ঢেউ রেখে যায় ঘাটে সুজন মাঝির স্মৃতি, যে জলে ফলে ধান প্রাণ আর চাষার শিল্পকৃতি, সেই নদী মাতা প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, সেই নদী মাতা প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম, তোমাকে প্রণাম।
River by river, they build walls. They call it development. We call it destruction. From the Amazon to the Nile, from the Mekong to the Padma, Dams are choking the veins of the river. They dry the land, they flood our homes, but river is life, water is life, and life must flow.
নদীর দেশে নাই নদী নাই নাই গো ভাটিয়ালি নদীর দেশে নাই নদী নাই নাই গো ভাটিয়ালি উড়ছে বুকে উড়ছে চোখে ধুধু চরের বালি উড়ছে বুকে উড়ছে চোখে ধুধু চরের বালি নদীর দেশে নাই নদী নাই নাই গো ভাটিয়ালি নদীর দেশে নাই নদী নাই নাই গো ভাটিয়ালি নদী বন্দি নদী বন্দি বন্দি নদীর ঢেউ সুবল মাঝি কই হারালো জানছো নাকি কেউ নদী বন্দি বন্দি চোখের জল উজান দেশে পাহাড়ে ডোবে বনানী অতল ডোবে মাঠ ঘাট বসত বাড়ি ডুবলো কানের ফুল উজান ভাটি পাড়ায় লোকে দুঃখের দুই কুল কার দরকারে পৃথিবীর নদী ওরা করে গ্রেফতার তবে কার দরকারে পৃথিবীর নদী ওরা করে গ্রেফতার আমাদের চোখে মায়াবতী বন নদীটায় হাহাকার আমাদের চোখে মায়াবতী বন নদীটায় হাহাকার তবে কার দরকারে পৃথিবীর নদী ওরা করে গ্রেফতার আমাদের চোখের জলের স্রোতে তার ঘর জ্বলছে আলো আমাদের চোখের জলের স্রোতে তার ঘরে জ্বলছে আলো এসো পাহাড় বর সমতল গ্রহের মশাল জ্বালো এসো পাহাড় আর বর সমতল গ্রহের মশাল জ্বালো পৃথিবীর নদী বন কিংবা পাহাড় মানুষ কখনো নয় মালিক তাহার। পৃথিবীর নদী বন কিংবা পাহাড় মানুষ তুমি হও বন্ধু সবার।
মানুষ মালিক নয় বন্ধু
হায় হায়
মানুষ তুমি হও বন্ধু সবার। পৃথিবীর নদী বন কিংবা পাহাড় মানুষ মালিক নয় বন্ধু সবার। পৃথিবীর নদী বন কিংবা পাহাড় মানুষ তুমি হও বন্ধু সবার। পৃথিবীর নদী বন কিংবা পাহাড় মানুষ মালিক নয় বন্ধু সবার।
Thank you. This was our first song, and now we are going to present our last. Thank you. In the afternoon, we will present our songs, and we invite you all to be there with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Samageet from Bangladesh on a two-country tour of the Philippines and Thailand as part of the Asian Music for People's Peace and Progress, AMP3. We now go and invite Dr. Walden Bello, please, co-founder and co-chair of the board Focus on the Global South, to give his greetings for this Focus at 30 conference event. Thank you so much.
Good morning to everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of you, both those of you in person as well as those online in the major celebration of the year of the 30th anniversary of Focus on the Global South. I will just say a few words because you'll be hearing so much more from different people, different experts, different progressive, engaged individuals over the next few hours. It's very memorable and very significant that we're here in the Chulalongkorn University Research Institute grounds, where Focus was established and founded 30 years ago. I was 50 years old then, so I'm not exactly a spring chicken, as the Americans would say. No. But let me just say that it's very significant that we were within university context, because one aspect, very important aspect of focus was analysis, rigorous analysis of a progressive nature taking place within a university context. And the other aspect of focus, which I think has been very significant, or the other half, is our activist engagements with the community, with movements, political and social movements over the last 30 years. And analysis and activist engagement really has been, you know, the engine of the work of focus. And it was from here that we engaged the great issues of the last 30 years. Among them, the struggle against corporate-driven globalization, which took focus to so many different parts of the world, including Porto Alegre, where the World Social Forum was founded, and to different activist engagements in Asia, in Africa, and even in North America and Europe. It was from this base in Bangkok that we also took part in the great anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist struggles over the last 30 years, from which we had expeditions to the Middle East, to Baghdad, to Palestine, to Lebanon, and all in the spirit of uniting analysis to action. And let me just say that together with others, movements, and other people, other civil society engagements, political parties even, we did achieve two things. And I think with the movements, we must celebrate these victories. One is we did win the battle against globalization. Nobody now says that globalization is good. If you remember, in 1995, globalization was what the media, the intellectual elites, and others were saying, this is the future of the world. And WTO, the World Trade Organization, was supposed to be the pinnacle of the multilateral order. Now, nobody talks about the WTO as a progressive institution. The other thing is we did contribute to the fight against US interventionism. And of course, people remember that Focus organized a trip to Baghdad to try to prevent the American invasion back in 2003. And some of the people here were part of that, like Herbert Tosena, who organized that trip. And all of this came to fruition in 2021 when the United States was driven out of Afghanistan. We were part of that process and we're very proud of it. The last thing I would just like to say is in 2000, Focus came out with a book called Deglobalization, Ideas for a New World Economy, And this was the concept of deglobalization was posed against the concept of globalization. So what is happening today is deglobalization. Even the corporate world is now embracing deglobalization. Even Donald Trump, in his speech in the UN, I think yesterday, said that deglobalization is the way to go. So the task, I think, that Focus is confronted with now is how do we push a different kind of deglobalization than that which Donald Trump is pushing. So let me just end there that the challenges have not ended, and we hope to be here and with Chulalongkorn University and KUSRI for the next 30 years and meeting commonly the challenges of the time. And I would just like to mention that in conclusion, many of you are joining online, and among them is our team from Cambodia, and we'd like to tell them, that we feel very much that you're part of us here today. We can understand why you're not here, but we'd like to say to our team from Cambodia, welcome, you really are part of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Walden, for setting the tone for the discussions of the day. And now I invite Dr. Pichaya Surapol, Deputy Director of the Chulalongkorn University Social Research Institute. Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good morning, Professor Walden Bello, Josh, Purugganan, Ras, Sukunti, co-directors, and Anuka, Regional Program Coordinator and Head of Bangkok, and also the distinguished speakers and guests. On behalf of Chulalongkorn University Social Research Institute, it is my great honor to warmly welcome you all to Focus at 30th Anniversary Conference, 30 years of resistance and solidarities, as the name on the screen, here at Social Innovation Hub, Chulalongkorn University, and to our speakers who are joining us online. Focus on the Global South has been a long-standing affiliate organization of our institute, and we are proud to have walked side by side for many decades. Throughout this year, Focus has worked with partners and community across the regions to advance peace, justice, democracy, and sustainability, and also come together to reflect, share, and chart a path forward for the future. Today's gathering is more than a celebration of 30 years. It is also the space for reflection, dialogue, and renewed solidarities as we look ahead to the challenges and opportunities of the next 30 years. We are grateful to welcome partners and our friends from across the regions and beyond who present the strengthens our shared vision for more just and sustainable world. As an academic institute, we value the role of that Focus will engage in meaningful conversation on some of the most pressing challenges of our time, from food sovereignty, globalization, deglobalization, to rethinking global power relations and rebuilding public economies. This decision is not only timely but essential in shaping new vision of multilateralism and cooperation led by the people of the Global South to shape the better futures. I wish you all the meaningful conversations today and fruitful exchange throughout the today programs. Thank you very much and happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaiyarat, and for all the warmth that Kusri has shown the focus team over the years. Now I hand over to Galil, who will take us through the program for the day, and then we start with our proceedings.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before I give a very brief run-through of our program for the day, let me just remind everyone to please get your interpretation device at the back, because our first panel will feature a speaker from Thailand, and it will be good to, understand each other, right? So those who cannot understand Thai, there will be Thai English interpretation, and you need to get the device at the back. Thank you everyone for making the time and for flying to Bangkok and for being in this gathering with focus on the Global South as we celebrate our 30th anniversary. Just to give a quick run-through of our program for the day, we'll have 4 panels. It's going to be a packed day. We'll have 2 panels in the morning and 2 panels in the afternoon. We'll feature rich discussions on the themes of food sovereignty, agrarian reform, and the commons. We'll also have a panel on globalization and deglobalization. And then later in the afternoon, we'll also talk about how to confront the empire towards a new multilateral order. And we'll cap it off with the politics of rebuilding a public economy. And of course, integrated across these panel discussions would be the very important critical issues in confronting the new architecture of authoritarianism that's seeping across the region, patriarchy, climate and environmental justice, and so much more. So as we gather today, we also thank Samageet for the kind reminder about the necessity for life to flow. So may the river of conversations continually flow in this gathering, in this conversation with key partners, key allies, comrades, fellow travelers in various people's struggles. So without further ado, less of me talking and more of us engaging in rich conversations, let me call on the first facilitator for our panel discussion on food sovereignty, the commons, and agrarian reform, Raphael Baladad, my colleague and comrade from the Philippines, and also representing the young voices in focus.
Thank you, Galil. Yeah, I'd like to be categorized as young, but I'm turning 40 this year, so sad. Anyway, good morning, friends, colleagues, and comrades, and welcome to our first panel discussion this morning on food sovereignty, agrarian reform, and the commons. More than just policy research areas for focus, they embody the core commitment to supporting communities in their struggles for self-determination, social justice, and sustainable development for the organization. Through these campaign frameworks, we have witnessed firsthand how the fight for land rights intersects with the broader struggle for democratic control over food systems, while the defense of common resources, whether water, forests, or seeds, or land, becomes inseparable from the pursuit of agrarian transformation. Over the decades, these pillars have shaped our methodology, improved our research priorities, and guided our solidarity work with peasants' organizations, indigenous communities, and social movements in various countrysides in the region. They have allowed us to develop a comprehensive understanding on how local struggles connect to global systems of power and how grassroots resistance can challenge dominant development paradigms. Land rights on land rights and agrarian reform, Focus co-founded over the years the Land Research Action Network, or LRAN, in 2000, monitored and researched World Bank-led market-assisted land reform, produced materials for social movements to resist the program in various countries, and the LRAN joined La Via Campesina and FIAN in the global campaign on agrarian reform in 2002, promoted rights to land and comprehensive redistributive land reform, the International Conference of Agrarian Reform and Rural Development, the UN Committee for Food Security, or CFS, FAO, UNFCCC meetings, and others, no? And in numerous movement and civil society spaces. We have worked with national, local, rural movements across Asia on the right to land, civil political rights, and other campaigns for social justice. Through the LRAN, the Action Research Team in Cambodia started in 2007, working towards agrarian justice and emerging analysis from local experiences. In defending the commons, our work centered on popular education, research, and writing on the commons and for public education since 2005, and mainly illustrates our work not only with peasant movements, but also with fisher folks, indigenous peoples, forest communities, and workers' organizations on elaborating the concept of the commons. Organizing and campaigning with many social movements on resisting green and blue economies, financialization, commercialization of land, water, and nature, and market mechanisms and other false solutions to climate change. Focus is primordial, and overriding aim has been to work with vulnerable communities in the Global South to deal with the disruptive impact on them unleashed by both external forces like transnational corporations and other internal and influential actors like landlords and elites. The two aspects of this mission has been participation in the resistance to exploitation, repression, and marginalization, and working with the community to articulate and promote alternatives to the forces and developments that threaten them. For food sovereignty, Focus has been involved with the global campaign since the 2000s, partnered with La Via Campesina in developing campaigns and documents on removing the WTO from all food and agriculture. We remain deeply involved in supporting and promoting FoodSov at all levels, from global, regional, national, even at the local levels, through research, analysis, coalition building, popular education, and policy advocacy. Focus was in the team that organized the very first international forum on food sovereignty in Mali, called Nyeleni. And we have continued our deep involvement in the Nyeleni process with the recent global gathering happening in Sri Lanka this year. And we are currently working as the editorial board of the Nyeleni newsletter. Food sovereignty has been Focus's campaign framework, especially in our thematic work on people's alternatives. Hence, for our panel this morning, we aim to locate more and situate focus work with rural communities on initiatives for agrarian transformation and the protection and promotion of the commons, and our work with partners across the globe in articulating the paradigm of food sovereignty. Hopefully, in the process, we will be able to highlight the key elements of Focus's methodology in coming up with analysis from the ground, transforming these analyses into spaces for building alliance that would contribute to empowering people's movements, combining different methods such as producing studies, organizing conferences, street actions, and other non-violent direct actions. For today's panel, we bring together voices from movements and colleagues to share insights, experiences, and visions for the path forward for Focus in building a more just and sustainable food and agriculture system. Let me first introduce the panel first before we proceed with the interventions. First, we have Surapol Songruk Pikeo, a member of the Executive Committee of the Southern Peasants Federation of Thailand, or SPFT, and is also a member of PMove, People's Movement for a Just Society in Thailand, calling for equal access on rights to housing and rights to agriculture, land, and natural resources. Can we give a round of applause to Pikao? Pikaw? Is it okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. Joining us online also is Baramee Chaiyarat, is a former coordinator of Thailand's Assembly of the Poor, or AOP, and currently AOP's advisor. AOP is a member of La Via Campesina, East and Southeast Asia, and is an ardent defender of peasant and forest people's rights. Baramee, are you online? Kapun ka? Okay. Also online is one of our colleagues and my mentor, Manahan, a Filipina feminist activist researcher based at Ghent University in Belgium, where she serves as a doctoral assistant within the conflict research group of the Department of Conflict and Development Studies. Prior to academia, Mean, as we fondly call her, worked for 15 years with Focus Philippines, first as a research assistant, then as a program officer, and finally as a senior program officer. And while in Focus, she helped build and defending and reclaiming the Commons program in the Philippines, as well as the Safe Agrarian Reform Alliance, and particularly its agrarian reform, anti-water, privatization, and alternative lines of work, combining research, advocacy, and transnational solidarity. Currently, she co-coordinates the Global Working Group Beyond Development, GWG Beyond Development, a global collective exploring radical and systemic emancipatory approaches to social and ecological transformation. Her PhD currently critically examines intersection of indigenous self-transformation, forest conservation, and human-nature relations in contested territories and landscapes. Sorry, I'm going a bit fast for the interpreters. In Bukidnon, in southern Philippines. Her current research continues to be inspired by the struggles she accompanied while at Focus, and now focusing on indigenous movements, ecofeminism, and the defense of land and water, and of course the commons. Please give a round of applause to Marianne Manahan. Also joining us online is Bang Henry Saragih, fresh from the National Peasant Day of Indonesia. Please give him a round of applause. Henry is a veteran peasant leader in Indonesia and widely regarded as a champion for agrarian reform and peasant rights throughout the region. His decades-long commitment to social justice has transformed both Indonesia's agricultural landscape and the global peasant movement. Henry is currently chairperson of Serikat Petani Indonesia, one of the country's broadest and most influential agrarian movements, advocating for land rights, agroecology, and rural development policies that prioritize peasant communities over corporate interests. Henry's impact extends internationally through his former role as General Secretary of La Via Campesina during SPI's tenure as the International Operating Secretariat. In this capacity, he coordinated global campaigns and strengthened solidarity between peasants' organizations worldwide, amplifying their collective voice in international forums. Most notably, Henry and SPI are recognized as the principal architects of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas, or UNDROP. This historic international instrument represents a milestone in recognizing peasant rights as a fundamental human right and making significant contribution to the region's ongoing pursuit of agrarian rights and justice. Henry, again, we welcome you to our panel. And lastly, in person today is my idol. Dr. Peter Rosset is renowned for his lifelong commitment to social justice and stands as an eminent and highly respected scholar activist, championing peasant rights, agroecology, and food sovereignty. His work on bridging academic research with grassroots advocacies made Peter one of the most influential voices in contemporary agrarian studies and rural social movements. Dr. Rosset has served as both staff and member and advisor for La Via Campesina. I hope I got that right. and sorry, and his deep engagement with peasant organizations worldwide helped in strengthening the articulation of calls and demands from the grassroots, ensuring that academic research remained grounded in the lived experiences of rural communities. As one of the 3 co-founders of LRAN, Dr. Rosset promoted scholar-activist collaboration, transforming research into tools that directly support community struggles for agrarian rights. Dr. Rosset has been a valued friend of Focus and collaborator for many years, and his commitment to the organization's mission is reflected in his current role as board member, where he continues to provide strategic guidance and intellectual leadership. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today. Okay, so without further ado, let's proceed to our panel. Maybe we can first call Surapol, Songruk, Pikaw, to give the first interventions. We'll prioritize the, sorry for our online panel, but let's take the those who are here first, and then, okay, you have the mic.
สวัสดีครับท่านผู้มีเกียรติแขกของโฟกัสทุกท่านนะครับที่มาร่วมงานวันนี้แล้วก็สวัสดีอาจารย์ปีเตอร์ด้วยนะครับรู้สึกยินดีอย่างยิ่งนะครับวันนี้ที่ได้มาร่วมงานครบรอบ30 ปีของโฟกัสแล้วก็ขอแสดงความยินดีกับโฟกัสที่เดินทางไกลมาจนถึงวันนี้แล้วก็คงจะเดินทางไกลไปอีกนานเพราะว่าการกดขี่ขูดรีดที่มีต่อพี่น้องเกษตรกรและประชาชนทั่วโลกยังดำเนินการต่อไปอยู่นะครับสำหรับผมก็มาในนามของสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้นะครับซึ่งเราต่อสู้ตั้งแต่เรื่องของที่ดินนะครับการเกิดขึ้นของสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้ก็เกิดขึ้นมาจากการลุกขึ้นสู้ของแรงงานไร้ที่ดินในภาคใต้ที่ต่อสู้กับการผูกขาดที่ดินในสวนปาล์มขนาดใหญ่ตั้งแต่ปี 2003 นะครับแล้วก็ถูกปราบปรามอย่างหนักในเดือนธันวาคมเดือนตุลาคมถึงเดือนธันวาคมปี 2003 แล้วก็ขบวนการต่อสู้ก็กระจัดกระจายแล้วก็สลายตัวไปเราได้สรุปบทเรียนเหล่านั้นแล้วก็มาก่อตั้งเป็นสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้ในปี 2008 นะครับในปลายปี 2008 ก็ได้เกิดสกต.หรือสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้ขึ้นมาเพื่อที่จะต่อสู้นำพาพี่น้องต่อสู้เรื่องของที่ดินนะครับซึ่งจากการต่อสู้เรื่องที่ดินก็ได้ขยายตัวมาที่เรื่องการสร้างชุมชนใหม่ซึ่งจะต้องประกอบด้วยระบบการเกษตรที่ก้าวหน้ากว่าเดิมก้าวหน้ากว่าการใช้สารเคมีทางการเกษตรเราต่อสู้ให้มีการกระจายการถือครองที่ดินจึงต้องปลดแอกเกษตรกรออกมาจากการผูกขาดเรื่องที่ดินแล้วก็ผูกขาดด้านการเกษตรทั้งหมดนะครับดังนั้นแนวทางเกษตรนิเวศและการสร้างอธิปไตยด้านอาหารจึงเป็นสิ่งหนึ่งที่สำคัญในการสร้างชุมชนใหม่ของแรงงานไร้ที่ดินนะครับซึ่งวันนี้ก็เป็นเกษตรกรที่ได้เข้าถึงที่ดินแต่ไม่มีสิทธิในที่ดินของรัฐนะครับก็เป็นการยึดครองที่ดินของรัฐโดยพฤตินัยนะครับดังนั้น การจัดการที่ดินของสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้จึงเป็นลักษณะการจัดการที่ดินถือครองที่ดินร่วมกันเป็นเจ้าของร่วมกันนะครับที่ในที่นี้ใช้คำว่าthe common land หรือ common property นะครับเป็นทรัพย์สินร่วมกันของพี่น้องประชาชนที่ร่วมกันต่อสู้นะครับผมก็ขอแนะนำความเป็นมาและก็องค์กรของสหพันธ์เกษตรกรภาคใต้ที่เกี่ยวข้องกับประเด็นในวันนี้ที่โฟกัสออนเดอะ Global South ได้จัดขึ้นมาขอบคุณครับ
Thank you so much, Pikaw. Peter, yeah, go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much to Focus for this invitation. As Raphael said, I have accompanied Focus one way or another for many, many years, and I recognize the important role that Focus has played over the years in developing very important analysis that has helped social movements in Asia, but also around the world, developing understand developing trends and threats, and has also facilitated a lot of exchange of knowledge and experience. It's a great pleasure to see a small reunion of some of the original members of the Land Research Action Network here. I see Shalmali, I see King Korn, who was the Thai team. I see Manahan, who was originally the Philippine team, and myself. So it's not the full team, but it's a good part of the team having a reunion here. So that's really nice. And as Raphael said, was an attempt by people on the research and analysis side to become part of a campaign together with the social movements that are grouped together in La Via Campesina to analyze and inform the struggle of peasant organizations around the world against the World Bank, originally against World Bank land policy, such as individualizing land titling, such as market-led agrarian reform and other negative policies that from the bank came down to the national level in many countries around the world. And then over time, we accompanied many different processes of social movements, such as the development by the landless workers movement in Brazil of the concept of popular or people's agrarian reform, which is, I think, an important concept because, as they say, the old classical agrarian reforms of the mid-20th century are no longer possible because they were based in a particular correlation of forces between national bourgeoisie and landless peasants that through globalization and transnationalization that possibility doesn't really exist anymore. But there still has to be, and that was, I could say, a strange class alliance between peasants who are poor and national bourgeoisie who are rich. Today, the idea of a class alliance would be between I see Boaventura in the audience, what our African comrades call working people. Working people in the countryside, that means peasants, farm workers, indigenous people, fisher folk, forest people, river people, and working people in the city. As the fastest demographic growth of the human population over the last half century has been the growth of popular or poor neighborhoods, the urban periphery around cities, who are mostly extended family members of peasants and other people who live in rural areas, and there has to be a work to develop that class alliance, what I call peasants in the countryside and peasants in the city, or working people in the countryside and working people in the city for the basis of a new agrarian reform in the future. So I wanted to mention that, and the other thing that I wanted to, other 2 points I wanted to make very briefly. One is how increasingly the face of land conflicts, the face of capitalism in rural areas, the face of the so-called agrarian question is the green face, how the green discourse, the climate discourse is providing cover for global and national capitalism around the world and its ongoing, never-ending struggle to steal the land of peasants and other rural people, now through carbon credits, forest cover commitments, fake forest regeneration, so-called renewable energy, and many other fake solutions to climate change is driving a lot of dispossession around the world, and how institutes like Focus help sharpen the analysis because it's very important to debunk the official analyses about the green economy and show how this is really capitalist business as usual and dispossession as usual, just under a green disguise. And the last point I wanted to mention is, I think, a key issue being debated by rural social movements around the world is the relationship between social movements, electoral political parties, and the state. We have many examples where social movements have invested a lot of time, energy, and political capital to elect friendly governments or to fail to elect them and have right-wing governments, but still not have any of those governments from the center left to the right resolve the real problems of of people in rural areas. And in fact, all of the governments across that political spectrum with policies that in one way or another are tearing rural communities apart. So to what the question, I guess, that social movements are debating is, to what extent should movements develop some kind of, in most cases, partial, in a few cases, total autonomy from electoral politics and the state in terms of communities organizing to solve a lot of their problems themselves, because many petitions to the state receive few responses and many lies and many false promises, and unless communities can organize themselves and resolve a lot of their problems, the state is not coming, and it's increasingly not coming to resolve those problems. So I wanted to mention that as an item on the agenda for analysis and debate. And once again, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next is our online panelists. But before we proceed, apologies, I have not presented to the floor the questions yet. So along with your interventions, please note that the questions are, what are the most pressing challenges or threats to food sovereignty, agrarian reform, and the commons? What are the lessons and assessments you wish to highlight with your collaboration with Focus and movements on these advocacy campaigns? So first, we're gonna call Henry Saragih, then Mayan, then Baramee. Is this okay? So Henry, Bang Henry, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity for me speak for the anniversary of the Focus Global South. I want to come to the Bangkok, but because the yesterday and until today, still the day of the National Peasant Day in Indonesia, I cannot go to the Thailand, to Bangkok. For me, Focus Global South, yeah, to make me remember what is our movement. We can say 25 years later. Yeah, I still remember how the Indonesian Peasant Union and Lapia Campesina, we joined together, yeah, action in Mexico, yeah, 2003, in Hong Kong, 2005, and in Geneva, 2006, 2007. How we are on the front of the action. Yeah, focus not just as the organization research and advocacy, but with us on the front against, yeah, against neoliberal, against the free trade agreement of the WTO. Yeah, the day, what I say is the day is very difficult, and the day is very important for our movement. We together, and of course, I think focus on the time is on the positions with the conflict, not just strong in with us in the action, but in the concept and in the lobby. Yeah, I still remember the person in the Focus Global South is the Alien Kwa. Yeah, I don't know where she is now, but I think she helped us to give analyze and advisory how we looking analyze of the WTO. And I think this is the point. And of course, in other tema, we join together on issue of the agrarian reform. Yeah, during the we make the conference of the agrarian reform on 21st century in Bukit Tinggi, 2012. Yeah, and of course on the tema on food sovereignty, and the last, of course, in issue of the right of the peasant. And as the our result together, now the peasant right as the United Nations Declaration. And I think it is the part that are working together. And the last point too, not the last, yeah, because many points, sorry. Yeah. How the focus global south, I think the role to the strengthening of the grassroots organization. Yeah. SPI, and I think of the Assembly of the Poor and of the peasant organization like in the Philippines or others in Asia. I think it's the role of the focus global south. And because that's, yeah, after we struggling, we can say 25 years, if we looking the situation in Indonesia now, yeah, and maybe in the other country in the Asia, how we need continue to strengthening of the uh, grassroots organization. Yeah, peasant movement like us is very important. Yeah, how you see the our role in the uh, political, agrarian, food issue, and peasant right in Indonesia, how the role of the SPI we can say is the on the center for the issue this. I think it's the need role of the focus global south for this. And beside, of course, yeah, on the political movement, yeah, I think it's now like the SPI, we have a project like this because since uh, 5 years, since 2020, we start to building the project of the Worker Party. Yeah, and I think it is the one the important in Asia, especially how to from the social movement. Yeah, we strong in the political movement too. And not the last, yeah, but it's important too for the future. Asia now, I think not just on the term of the soul like before. Yeah, because we say the focus global soul. Yeah, maybe we need interpreted the name of the focus global soul. Yeah, under the changing world now, under the changing of the situation now. Yeah, terminology south and the north maybe we need to changing to looking. But focus is important. But maybe global south is maybe we need to discussion about that. Special after we looking the what is happening now in China. Yeah. If we looking in from the perspective of the economy, yeah, and of course in the politics, yeah, and we looking for the total global in the world, yeah. I think it is the important for us, and of course for the looking how do we more in the center, yeah, to the active in the as the solution, yeah, for the problem international issue now. Like as we know, the uh, extreme ultra colonialized happened in the Palestine. Yeah, I think it is the one issue in the world we need to looking for the focus. Yeah, besides I say the changing on the China and the role of China in the world now and how the for the future economic and politics for us. I think this is for me and congratulations for the focus and of course for the uh, all of the our plan in focus global souls. Yeah, because we have working together and struggle together now, and we forward for the our struggling for the agrarian reform, food sovereignty, and the peasant right, and against of the neoliberal policy WTO. Yeah, because we need more alternative now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Henry. I think Henry answered both questions already, but thank you so much. Next is Mary Ann Manahan, our esteemed colleague. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Togs, for that introduction. Good morning, friends, colleagues, and comrades in Bangkok and online, and congratulations to Focus for its celebration of its 30 years anniversary. And no easy feat. Thank you for the invitation to be part of such an amazing panel, and it's always good to be in company of comrades. Apologies I can't join in person because I'm still recovering from a viral infection. It is an honor to join you in celebrating the 30 years of political commitment and transformative change and justice. I speak today with gratitude and also with nostalgia. Focus has not only shaped national, regional, and global debates on justice, food sovereignty, agrarian reform, and the commons, it has also shaped me personally. My political formation as an activist researcher and as a scholar was deeply influenced by my mentors in Focus, such as Shalmali and Joy, as well as Focus' insistence on critical inquiry, connected social movements, and on the importance of knowledge co-creation and collaboration, and on building solidarities across struggles.
Ma'am, sorry. Can you slow down your
Okay,
voice? It's okay.
sure.
Take your time.
Yeah,
Take your
okay,
time.
sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
I've always been known in Focus as a fast speaker, so I'm just being consistent in my practice. But I'll slow down for the purpose of of course for interpreters. So I don't give them a difficult job. I was as I mentioned, Focus was founded on the conviction that social and people's movement can reshape and the rules of the economy and the state. Today, amid cascading polycrisis, whether it's the climate breakdown, rising inequality and debt, shrinking civic space, volatile food and energy systems, or digital extractivism and resurgent authoritarianism, like what Bang Henry has mentioned, our task is not only to resist, but to build visions, practices, and power that secure dignified livelihoods and living ecologies. The framework of deconstruction and reconstruction of deglobalization, as Walden mentioned in the beginning, is as urgent today as it was in 1995. Looking back while also looking forward, I want to share in this introduction three lessons I have learned from Focus's work with movements, lessons I believe that remain vital for the future. Lesson 1. Food systems are political. For decades, our region have been told that liberalization, global value chains, and corporate concentration would feed the world. What we saw instead were land grabs, precarious labors, import dependence, and the erosion of farmers' seeds and local markets. Decisions on subsidies, trade rules, and procurement are never neutral. They privilege some actors and knowledge systems while marginalizing others. Who grows the food, who controls the land, and who eats are questions of power and not just productivity. The COVID-19 pandemic, for example, made this clearer than ever. Food sovereignty is not abstract. It is about community survival and societal survival. Lockdowns and border closures expose the fragility of global supply chains, while communities with access to local markets, seeds, and commons endured. Resilience, therefore, lies not in corporate boardrooms, but in the hands of farmers, workers, and communities who care for land and each other. At the same time, this care, which is so often performed by women in the fields, in the markets, in kitchens and households, is political labor that sustains entire food systems. Yet it is routinely invisibilized and devalued. So to struggle for food sovereignty is also to struggle for the recognition and redistribution of this gendered labor. Lesson 2. Land is the fulcrum. Agrarian reform is not a relic of the past. And of course, it has been called People's Agrarian Reform, Integral Agrarian Reform, by, for example, by La Via Campesina. Agrarian reform is the foundation of real radical democracy, food sovereignty, and justice, where communities gain secure collective control of land and water, food systems diversified, ecosystems recovered, and women's leadership often flourished. Where land remained concentrated, poverty persisted, and degradation deepened. Today, as inequality, debt, climate breakdown converge, redistributive land reform is once again urgent. A structural demand wrestled from below and not a mere policy footnote. And we have seen that from the great showing of peasant movements across Indonesia, for example, yesterday, the National Peasant Day. With the 2026 International Conference on Agrarian Reform and Rural Development approaching, Focus and its allies can make clear why any just future must begin with people's rights to land. And finally, lesson 3, and I'll stop here before I think we have another round of conversation. The commons is a living institution. Shared forests, fisheries, irrigation systems, grazing lands, and knowledge commons have always underpinned community survival. When enclosed, whether by concessions, carbon markets, or patents, communities lost both livelihoods and cultural practices of care and stewardship. When defended through either seeds networks, customary land tenure, community forest, or cooperatives, autonomy often grew. Defending the commons, therefore, is not only in rural areas but also in the cities, where public spaces, water systems, community gardens, and housing cooperatives resist privatization and exclusion. To reclaim the commons, whether it's the rural or urban, is to reclaim collective rights. That is to strengthen solidarity, expand spaces of democracy and care. And these lessons reminds us that democratizing power over land, over seeds, over water, over forest and budget are at the heart of struggles for agrarian reform, food sovereignty, and defending and reclaiming the commons. This also reminds us of the enduring relevance of focus that is to resist, to re-exist, and to build solidarities across borders for a just and life-affirming future. Thank you very much, Dogs, and I'll stop at that.
Thank you so much, Mayan. Our next speaker is Baramee Chaiyarat from AOP. Is Baramee online? Hello, Baramee. You have the floor. I think Baramee has a presentation, no? Can we...
ครับสวัสดีครับสวัสดีทุกคนครับก็เดี๋ยว PowerPoint เดี๋ยวค่อยฉายก็ได้ครับก็ผมก็มาจากสมัชชาคนจนนะครับสมัชชาคนจนก็ก่อตั้งมา30 ปีพร้อมๆกับโฟกัสเลยนะครับก็ขอแสดงความยินดีด้วยนะครับที่เราเติบโตมาด้วยกันนะครับเราเติบโตมาในฐานะที่สมัชชาคนจนเองก็เป็นองค์กรประชาชนครับเป็นองค์กรประชาชนที่ประกอบด้วยเครือข่ายชาวบ้านที่มีปัญหาได้รับผลกระทบจากการประกาศเป็นที่ดินของรัฐการประกาศเขตป่าทับที่เป็นคนที่ได้รับผลกระทบจากการสร้างเขื่อนเป็นคนที่คัดค้านการสร้างเขื่อนเป็นชาวประมงนะเป็นชุมชนชายฝั่งเป็นคนงานนะครับพวกเราก็ได้รับผลกระทบจากนโยบายการพัฒนาของรัฐนี่แหละครับถ้าเกิดย้อนกลับไปสัก30 ปีก่อนที่ก่อตั้งมาก็คือว่านโยบายการพัฒนาต่างๆเนี่ย
Sorry, we're just experiencing some technical
พัฒนา
difficulties.
ที่อะไรเป็นการแย่งชิงทรัพยากรพูดเร็วไปเหรอครับ
Are we okay now? Okay. Please proceed. Yeah, we're okay.
ที่มุ่งเน้นในการแย่งชิงทรัพยากรเนี่ยนะครับเขาก็รัฐบาลก็สร้างเขื่อน นะเพื่อที่จะนำน้ำไปใช้ในการผลิตกระแสไฟฟ้านำน้ำไปใช้ในการอุปโภคบริโภคก็คือไม่ได้ใช้ในการเกษตรนะครับการแย่งชิงพื้นที่ป่าไปเพื่อที่จะทำเป็นแหล่งท่องเที่ยวนะไปตั้งให้เอกชนไปลงทุนทำสัมปทานปลูกป่าหรือว่าทำสัมปทานอื่นๆนะครับทำอุตสาหกรรมอะไรประมาณนี้นะครับพี่น้องเป็นคนงานในโรงงานของเราก็มีปัญหาเรื่องว่าพอมันมีการสร้างโรงงานพัฒนาอุตสาหกรรมขึ้นมาแล้วคนงานก็ไม่ได้รับค่าตอบแทนที่เป็นธรรมไม่มีสวัสดิการไม่มีการคุ้มครองแรงงานมีปัญหาเรื่องความปลอดภัยในการทำงานอะไรประมาณนี้นะครับทั้งหมดทั้งปวงเนี่ยมันก็ผมก็คิดว่ามันเป็นเรื่องที่เหมือนกับสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้นกับประเทศในโลกฝ่ายใต้ประเทศอื่นๆนะครับแล้วก็มันก็คือผลกระทบที่มาจากการแสวงหากำไรภายใต้ลัทธิเสรีนิยมใหม่เนี่ยนะครับผ่านมาจนถึงวันนี้เนี่ยผมก็ยังคิดว่าประเด็นเดิมแหละครับที่มันยังเป็นเรื่องที่คุกคามนะเป็นประเด็นเดิมที่ยังเป็นเรื่องที่คุกคามต่อสักครู่นะครับ
Thank you so much, Baramee.
ประเด็นเดิมที่
Okay, sorry.
ยังคุกคามเป็นการคุกคามอธิปไตยทางอาหารของเราเนี่ยก็คือศัตรูของเราก็คือลัทธิเสรีนิยมใหม่ ซึ่งก็มีเครื่องมือที่สำคัญก็คือองค์กรการค้าโลกที่พยายามที่จะสร้างกลไกการค้าที่ไม่เป็นธรรมนะครับ แล้วก็พยายามบอกเราว่านี่แหละคือการค้าเสรีนะพยายามที่จะมีกลไกที่สนธิสัญญาต่างๆ ที่ถูกสร้างขึ้นมาเป็นสนธิสัญญาที่ล้วนแล้วแต่สนับสนุนอะไรลัทธิเสรีนิยมใหม่ทั้งนั้นนะครับรวมทั้งถึงแม้ว่าพวกเราจะพยายามต่อสู้เนี่ยแต่ว่าก็เราก็ยังเจอกับปัญหาใหม่ๆอีกที่เกิดขึ้นมาอีกภายในช่วง 20-30 ปีที่ผ่านมาก็คือปัญหาเรื่องการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศผมคิดว่าปัญหาการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศก็เป็นปัจจัยสำคัญที่ทำลายอธิปไตยทางอาหารโดยเฉพาะการแก้ไขปัญหาการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศที่พวกลัทธิเสรีนิยมใหม่เนี่ยฉวยโอกาสเอาไปแสวงหากำไรนะมันกลายเป็นการกลับมาแย่งชิงที่ดินของเรามันกลายเป็นการกลับมาบังคับให้เราต้องทำการเกษตรที่เป็นการเกษตรแปลงใหญ่เป็นการเกษตรแบบดิจิตอลซึ่งเบื้องหลังในการเกษตรในระบบเกษตรแบบดิจิตอลเนี่ยมันก็กลายเป็นเบื้องหลังที่มาของอุตสาหกรรมขุดเจาะที่สร้างภาวะเรือนกระจกสร้างการเปลี่ยนแปลงสภาพภูมิอากาศมากทำให้โลกร้อนยิ่งขึ้นกว่าการผลิตของพวกเราอีกด้วยซ้ำไปครับซึ่งทีนี้พวกเราจะทำยังไงถามว่าแล้วบทบาทของโฟกัสจะอยู่ยังไงสำหรับผมเนี่ยที่เรียกว่ารู้จักโฟกัสมานานพอสมควรเนี่ยในอดีตเนี่ยผมเห็นบทบาทโฟกัสที่สำคัญอย่างหนึ่งก็คือผมคิดว่าโฟกัสเนี่ยเป็นคนที่เชื่อมร้อยในขบวนการภาคประชาชนที่เคยอยู่ในภูมิภาคต่างๆเนี่ยนะครับที่ประสบปัญหาแล้วก็มีโอกาสได้มาเจอกันได้มาพูดคุยกันผมเคยได้รับฟังในเรื่องการค้าเสรีเนี่ยนะครับตัวจากประเทศในละตินอเมริกาเมื่อสัก10 กว่าปี 20 ปีก่อนเนี่ยซึ่งตอนนั้นเนี่ยผมยังไม่ได้รับรู้เรื่องอะไรมากมายนะเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการค้าเสรีแต่ว่าโฟกัสเองก็เป็นเจ้ากี้เจ้าการเป็นแม่งานในการจัดงานนี้ขึ้นมาเอาคนจากละตินอเมริกามาคุยให้ฟังว่าเฮ้ยผลกระทบจากการค้าเสรีที่จริงๆจังๆเนี่ยมันเกิดอะไรขึ้นผมคิดว่าอันนี้ก็เป็นการเริ่มในกระบวนการในการคัดค้านเรื่องการค้าเสรีในประเทศไทยด้วยซ้ำไปครับผมอยากให้โฟกัสเนี่ยก็ทำบทบาทนี้ด้วยนะครับทำบทบาทนี้ต่อไปแล้วก็ซึ่งสถานการณ์ตอนนี้มันก็อะไรนะรุนแรงมากขึ้นเนาะโดยเฉพาะอีกอันหนึ่งผมอยากจะคุยเรื่องความท้าทายอีกนิดนึงย้อนกลับไปความท้าทายอีกนิดนึงก็คือนโยบายเศรษฐกิจของทรัมป์ของจีนและของอเมริกา นะซึ่งทั้งสองฝ่ายนี้ถึงแม้ว่าจะเป็นศัตรูกัน แต่ว่าเป็นศัตรูที่เป็นอันตรายต่ออธิปไตยทางอาหารของพวกเราทั้งคู่ เราจะรับมือตรงนี้ได้ยังไงโฟกัสน่าจะเป็นคนที่ช่วยเหลือเราในการรวบรวมความรู้เรื่องพวกนี้ที่จะมาต่อต้านหรือต่อสู้กับสิ่งพวกนี้ด้วยก็ขอบคุณมากครับ
Thank you so much, Baramee. Apologies for interrupting you earlier. Okay. Next, we will proceed to our next question for the panel. But for just to get more inputs from PCAO, can I reiterate the first question? And then we can proceed with the second question. The first question is, what are the most pressing challenges, threats to food sovereignty, agrarian reform, and the commons, and what are the lessons and assessments you wish to highlight on your collaboration with Focus? The second question, PCAO, is, and for everyone in the panel, how could Focus contribute to strengthening people's movements, struggles, and resistances? We will start with you, PCAO.
ครับขอบคุณมากครับคือสิ่งที่เป็นภัยคุกคามต่อเรื่องการสร้างอธิปไตยด้านอาหารสำหรับประเทศไทยเนี่ยผมคิดว่าปัจจัยภายในประเทศนอกจากเรื่องต่างประเทศที่เพื่อนๆของเราได้พูดมาแล้วเนี่ยผมคิดว่าประเทศไทยณปัจจุบันเนี่ยการเมืองการปกครองที่มีลักษณะเป็นเผด็จการนะครับเผด็จการที่อยู่ในคราบในรูปแบบของการเมืองแบบรัฐสภาเนี่ยนะครับซึ่งปัจจุบันเนี่ยนักวิชาการก็เรียกว่าเป็นneo absolute monarchy หรือสมบูรณาญาสิทธิราชย์ใหม่อันนี้คือสิ่งที่เป็นภัยคุกคามที่สำคัญเพราะว่าบรรยากาศการเมืองการปกครองหรือการอยู่ร่วมกันในสังคมที่ไม่มีความเป็นประชาธิปไตยในการแสดงออกทางการเมืองการวิพากษ์วิจารณ์นโยบายของรัฐบาลหรือการดำเนินงานของรัฐเนี่ยไม่ได้มีอิสระเสรีที่เต็มที่เนี่ยเป็นสิ่งที่นำมาซึ่งการผูกขาดทางการเมืองก็นำมาซึ่งการผูกขาดทางด้านเศรษฐกิจนะครับซึ่งภาคเกษตรก็เป็นส่วนหนึ่งที่สำคัญของระบบเศรษฐกิจไม่ว่าประเทศไหนนะครับแล้วก็ในการทำการเกษตรเนี่ยสิ่งที่สำคัญก็คืออาหารที่ดินและอาหารดังนั้นเมื่อมีการผูกขาดทางเศรษฐกิจเนี่ยการผูกขาดเรื่องที่ดินและปัจจัยการผลิตและทรัพยากรธรรมชาติสิ่งแวดล้อมก็เป็นสิ่งที่มีความสำคัญหมายความว่าเกษตรกรเนี่ยมีโอกาสน้อยมากที่จะเข้าถึงที่ดินหรือการมีสิทธิในที่ดินที่สมบูรณ์แบบหรือการรับรองสิทธิที่มีความมั่นคงให้กับพี่น้องเกษตรกรซึ่งเป็นแรงงานอยู่ในภาคเกษตรก็จะเป็นสิ่งที่เข้าถึงยากดังนั้นภัยคุกคามที่สำคัญจึงเป็นเรื่องของการเมืองการปกครองที่ปิดกั้นสิทธิเสรีภาพในการแสดงออกทางการเมืองและปิดกั้นโอกาสหรือการเข้าถึงทรัพยากรและปัจจัยการผลิตต่างๆนะครับนี่คือสิ่งที่เป็นภัยคุกคามที่สำคัญดังนั้นเมื่อมีเป็นภัยคุกคามแบบนี้เนี่ยโอกาสที่จะสร้างความมั่นคงอธิปไตยด้านอาหารหรืออำนาจสูงสุดของประชาชนที่จะมีอำนาจในการกำหนดระบบการผลิตกำหนดระบบการผลิตอาหารและกำหนดเรื่องของอาหารทุกอย่างเนี่ยก็เป็นสิ่งที่ยากมากเพราะว่าการระบบเศรษฐกิจที่ผูกขาดเนี่ยนะครับก็ทำให้ผู้ผลิตรายย่อยเกษตรกรรายย่อยนี่ก็ต่อสู้ยากมากนะครับเพราะว่าการผลิตรายใหญ่เนี่ยมันได้ผูกขาดเรื่องการตลาดเรื่องการแปรรูปไว้แทบทั้งหมดดังนั้นเกษตรกรรายย่อยผลิตอย่างไรก็ตามใจนะครับก็ไม่ว่าจะเราทำอย่างไรเนี่ยคือต้นทุนการผลิตของเรามันสูงกว่าเขาอยู่เสมอการแข่งขันในตลาดทั่วไปเนี่ยคือแทบไม่มีโอกาสสู้ได้เลยนะครับดังนั้นภัยคุกคามในเรื่องของการเมืองและก็เศรษฐกิจที่มีการผูกขาดอย่างมากในประเทศไทยเนี่ยเป็นภัยคุกคามที่สำคัญต่อเรื่องของการสร้างอธิปไตยด้านอาหารนะครับเพราะว่าที่ดินและปัจจัยการผลิตเนี่ยเป็นที่มาที่สำคัญของอำนาจสูงสุดของประชาชนที่จะควบคุมระบบอาหารเป็นอำนาจสูงสุดที่จะสร้างแล้วก็กำกับทิศทางของระบบอาหารในประเทศนะครับที่จะมีผลต่อปากท้องของพี่น้องประชาชนทั้งหมดนะครับสำหรับบทบาทของโฟกัสนะครับผมก็มีข้อเสนอ 2-3 ประเด็นว่า หนึ่งก็คือบทบาทที่เป็นองค์กรที่ประสานหรือประมวลองค์ความรู้ต่างๆจากหลายประเทศหลายทวีปมาให้กับพี่น้องนะครับประชาชนเกษตรกรหรือแรงงานในภาคเกษตรโดยเฉพาะสำหรับประเทศไทยเองนะครับเราก็ยังจำเป็นที่ต้องมีองค์ความรู้ความเข้าใจจากหลากหลายประเทศนะครับดังนั้นการต่อสู้ของพวกเราที่ต่อสู้กับทุนผูกขาดในประเทศไทยนะครับต่อสู้กับลัทธิเสรีนิยมใหม่ที่เข้ามาในประเทศไทยเนี่ยนะครับก็จำเป็นต้องมีความรู้ความเข้าใจประสบการณ์บทเรียนจากหลากหลายประเทศหลากหลายพื้นที่มาเป็นเครื่องมือสำคัญในการต่อสู้ประเด็นที่2ก็คือการเชื่อมโยงเครือข่ายระหว่างประเทศพี่น้องเกษตรกรแรงงานไร้ที่ดินทั้งหมดก็ควรที่จะได้มีโอกาสพบปะพูดคุยแลกเปลี่ยนประสบการณ์ความรู้มีโอกาสที่จะสร้างพลังด้วยกันในการต่อสู้กับเสรีนิยมใหม่ซึ่งครอบงำไปทั่วโลกนะครับประเด็นที่3นะครับที่เป็นข้อเสนอต่อโฟกัสก็คือการช่วยพัฒนาข้อเสนอต่างๆของพี่น้องประชาชนโดยเฉพาะพี่น้องเกษตรกรรายย่อยให้เป็นข้อเสนอทางนโยบายที่ใช้รณรงค์ไปทั้งในประเทศแล้วก็ระหว่างประเทศซึ่งการรณรงค์ผลักดันให้เกิดการเปลี่ยนแปลงนโยบายก็ต้องอาศัยทั้งความรู้อาศัยพลังของเครือข่ายความร่วมมือแล้วก็อาศัยข้อเสนอที่มีความแหลมคมและก็การรณรงค์ในสื่อระหว่างประเทศด้วยซึ่งก็จะเป็นการเดินทางไปด้วยกันระหว่างองค์กรที่ทำงานด้านวิชาการทำงานระหว่างประเทศแบบโฟกัสกับพี่น้องประชาชนขบวนการเคลื่อนไหวของเกษตรกรรายย่อยทั้งในประเทศไทยและประเทศต่างๆที่เป็นความร่วมมือด้วยกันนะครับก็ขอบคุณโฟกัสอย่างยิ่งนะครับขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณครับพี่แก้ว Thank you พี่แก้ว Next for the rest of the panelists, sorry, I need to reiterate the second question again. How could focus contribute to strengthening people's movements, struggles, and resistances? And let's start with Peter.
Thank you, Raphael. So I think I'll just connect some of the things that the others have said during the first round and that Keo said during the second round. We heard from Baramee how focus played that critical role during the time of the WTO and globalization in helping social movements like La Via Campesina understand what was happening in the world at that time. And now we hear from Bang Henry and also from Baramee how we have to struggle once again to understand major changes in the world order. We have the rise of China. A lot of questions about China. Is China an imperialist power or not? How to understand, as Baramee said, that China and Trump are enemies of each other, but both enemies of peasants. How do we make sense of the current world of the Trump tariffs and where countries and the other countries in the South fit in? Henry is asking, does the word Global South, the phrase Global South even make sense if one of the new, perhaps, imperialist powers it was previously classified as a South power, i.e. China? There are many questions and a lot of uncertainty. And so I would say my first answer is that focus needs to play that role also in developing analysis and education process with social movements to help together in a collaborative co-production of knowledge way understand, make sense of the way the world is changing. And then I'd also like to pick up what Keo said, which is focus always played an important role in bringing attention to the viewpoints of social movements, to the message of social movements. And I think that's very important because the way the global media is working these days, it's very hard for those social movement voices to break through and get heard. And so I think that's also an important role for focus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next, Bang Henry.
Yeah. My question begs me to answer. Yeah. I think 30 years, and for me personally, 25 years close with the focus global south. I think the position of the focus has a better, yeah, not as the teacher for us, yeah, but as our friend. We collaborate, not looking like the arrogant academic or the intellectual, but the intellectual with us on the movement. And maybe better agree, we call the intellectual organic. Yeah. And I think the position of the focus must be continue and to more increasing for the future. I think it is the very important uh, to make us clear to understand what will happen now. Yeah, because many changing in the world, many have the we can say done, but for the next we need to more understanding the situation and to looking to building our agenda. Yeah, WTO now is not uh, like the WTO on 2000. Yeah, uh, America as the champion of the liberalization, they say they not implement the liberalization totally. Yeah, it means the world is the changing, and this moment I think we need the rule of the focus continue as our partner moment how to looking the situation and for the future. The same with the politics. The era of the on the uh, we can say democratization, yeah, or struggling in Philippines, yeah, and now and after that Indonesia, yeah, we have done, but the politics, yeah, on the popular system now, yeah, they can take the power, but they not implement the totally what we want. The the past president Indonesia, they have put the agrarian reform, put sovereignty, and what's the SPI want, but they don't implement. And under the new president now, we on the process to make the new commitment again. But we think how the easy for the government, they making the
Okay. Henry?
commitment for us to implement the for them to forget for them. And how the our enemy, the transnational corporation and the national corporation, they're more strong to do to cancel what's our agenda. Thank you very much. I think it's now not enough time for the answer all the important questions, but we need to next meeting again for this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Henry. Uh, Sorry, we're a bit pressed for time. So, Mayan,
Yeah, thanks.
next.
Yeah, thanks, Dogs. Before I answer the question around the role of what can be the role of focus in terms of accompanying social movements, is I just want to kind of maybe answer first and pick up from some of the points that my co-panelists have picked up, and this is particularly on the threats and challenges that we are confronting collectively today, and this is picking up also from what Peter mentioned in terms of what the climate crisis is engendering in terms of the dominant solution, which is again centering around decarbonization, the phasing out of fossil fuels, expanding solar, wind energy, and hydrogen, and capturing carbon through forests and markets. And this is problematic because all of this is wrapped in neo net zero promises that is framed really just for a carbon metric logic that reduces the question and necessity of transformation to accounting exercise. So the question we must ask is, who benefits and who decides amid this decarbonization that is going on in the world today. And this is really problematic for three main reasons. For example, the first, which Peter has already mentioned, is that the race to decarbonize has given birth to a dangerous frontier, which is green colonialism. Bang Henry mentioned that we should kind of rethink the categories and concepts of global south and global north. And for me, these are still very important categories because they are geopolitical and historical category of marginalization and exploitation. And the global south is again once treated as a resource frontier. So you have lithium extracted from Latin America, nickel from Southeast Asia, and cobalt from Africa, extracted to power the global north's clean energy future. So in this case, climate and biodiversity agendas are really being co-opted by states and corporations to justify new enclosures. The second problem around this trajectory is that it creates green sacrifice zones. No, a couple of weeks ago, we were just in Indonesia for a global meeting on industrial politics, and we're seeing that the nickel mining in North Maluku ecosystem have been devastated for electric vehicle battery production. But that's not only what's happening in the so-called downstream operations where you are supposed to process these critical raw materials. Again, forest lands and farmlands are being converted to enclaves, to special economic zones, industrial parks to give way for factories and industries. And finally, I think the problem with this trajectory is that the decarbonization, the race to decarbonize reproduces what Austrian and German activist scholars Wiesen and Brand call as imperial mode of living. So everyday life in the global north, in the capital, in the metropoles, whether it's fossil fuel based or green, really depends on invisible extraction elsewhere of resources, of labor, for example, of energy. So between 1990 and 2020, there has been massive research that has been done to show how the North has persistently extracted more from the South than it gave back. And finally, I think just to kind of connect this to the roles that focus can play, I've always seen the work of focus. The methodology of focus is to accompany movements, not to be above it, but work alongside it. And I think my co-panelists already mentioned the need, for example, for research to enact research that emancipates. But that also includes the importance of political translation and storytelling. And this is where I think focus has been very good in terms of politically translating complex debates on trade, debt, carbon markets, climate finance to make it legible for grassroots struggles on the one hand, but also on the other hand, amplifying the lived realities of dispossession and resistance so they resonate in local, national, regional, and global arenas. So for me, storytelling is always political. So when movements tell their own stories, like what Baramee, Bang Baramee and Bang Henry and Rizwa has mentioned, they shift they shift the narratives and open for political possibilities. But at the same time, to kind of again pick up from what Bang Henry has mentioned a while ago, theorizing often is done with the movements. It's always in collaboration and not separate from them. And finally, I think just the importance at this point to bridge and to connect. I think Focus has always been a convener. It has helped build transnational and regional solidarity. And today, this means strengthening what I think has been called, for example, as eco-territorial internationalism. That is the praxis of solidarity that is rooted in territorial struggles but be global in scope. And this solidarity, for example, is ever more important as we, for example, are seeing the massive genocide that is being hoisted against the Palestinian people by the settler colonial state of Israel. And I think supporting global initiatives and the struggle of the Palestinian people for liberation, for emancipation, is one of the key tasks that we have at hand today. So this solidarity is, in closing, is to not only as a form of resistance, but it also a form and articulation of creation, not only stopping destruction, but weaving alternatives, whether it's on agroecology, on the commons, on reciprocity, care, and ancestral knowledge. It is internationalism not of the states, but of peoples that are tied together in the defense of life and territory. Thank you very much, Togs.
Thank you so much, Mayan. And lastly, Baramee. Baramee?
ครับจะให้ผมพูดเรื่องอะไรครับผม เออผมถ้าให้ผมพูดถึงเรื่องโฟกัสเนี่ยผมอยากจะพูดอีกสักนิดหนึ่งนะครับว่าคือผมเห็นว่าในการทำงานร่วมกัน 20-30 ปีที่ผ่านมาเนี่ยเอ่อนอกจากโฟกัสแล้วเนี่ยยังมีองค์กร NGO อีกหลายองค์กรในระดับสากลที่มาทำงานร่วมกับเรา แต่ผมคิดว่าสิ่งหนึ่งที่โฟกัสยังคงความเป็นเพื่อนเป็นมิตรกับพวกเราก็คือ ผมคิดว่าโฟกัสยังเป็นองค์กรที่มีจุดยืนอยู่เคียงข้างเอ่อชาวไร่ชาวนาอย่างพวกเราครับ อันนี้ผมคิดว่าเป็นเรื่องที่สำคัญมาก เพราะว่าในทางการเมืองในระดับสากลแล้วเนี่ยเราเราคิดว่าเรามียังไม่ได้มีองค์กรที่มายืนเคียงข้างเราอย่างนี้มากมายนักนะครับในกระบวนการเยเรนีที่ผ่านมาที่ผมได้ไปประชุมด้วย แล้วก็เจอคนจากโฟกัสด้วยรวมทั้งเจอชามารีด้วยเนี่ยผมก็คิดว่าชามารีและทางโฟกัสเองเนี่ยก็มีบทบาทสำคัญในการที่จะทำงานอยู่ข้างหลังในการผลักดันกระบวนการเยเรนีซึ่งเป็นกระบวนการเรื่องอธิปไตยทางอาหารในระดับสากลขึ้นมาได้นะครับเราหาองค์กรที่มีบทบาทเคียงข้างเราอยู่อย่างนี้เนี่ยน้อยครับ ดังนั้นเนี่ยผมอยากให้โฟกัสรักษาจุดยืนในเรื่องนี้และทำงานในเรื่องนี้ต่อไปอีกอย่างหนึ่งที่ผมอยากจะฝากโฟกัสไว้ในเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการทำงานตรงนี้คือผมคิดว่าเนื้อหาที่ทำงานออกมาแล้วเนี่ยถ้าเกิดเรามีการพูดคุยแลกเปลี่ยนแล้วก็ทำย่อยปัญหาคือว่าพอสมาชิกเราเป็นชาวไร่ชาวนาเนี่ยเราก็มีความจำกัดในเรื่องภาษาเนาะในเรื่องภาษาที่มันเป็นวิชาการเนี่ยถ้าเกิดเรามีการทำงานใกล้ชิดกันมากขึ้น แล้วก็ทำเรื่องภาษาต่างๆเนี่ยให้มันเป็นอะไรเป็นภาษาที่เข้าใจง่ายขึ้น ผมก็คิดว่าน่าจะเดินหน้าไปด้วยกันได้อย่างดีขึ้นสุดท้ายก็คือเรื่องประชาธิปไตยผมเห็นว่าโฟกัสเองก็มีบทบาทในเรื่องความเป็นประชาธิปไตยอยู่สูงนะครับ แล้วก็การต่อสู้เรื่องประชาธิปไตยอยู่สูง ซึ่งสมัชชาคนจนเองก็ยังผลักดันในเรื่องการทำรัฐธรรมนูญมาต่อเนื่องกันมาหลายปีแล้ว ทีนี้ปีนี้เราก็ครบรอบ30 ปีด้วย แล้วก็จัดงานด้วยก็คิดว่าอยากจะชวนโฟกัสเนี่ยเข้ามามีบทบาทในการทำเรื่องเคลื่อนไหวในเรื่องประชาธิปไตยของพวกเราด้วยนะครับ จริงๆไม่ใช่เฉพาะแค่ในประเทศไทยเนาะผมคิดว่าปัญหาขนาดนี้ก็คือเป็นปัญหาเรื่องอะไรปัญหาเรื่องที่ประเทศต่างๆมันหันขวาเลี้ยวขวาไปสนับสนุนอำนาจนิยมกันหมดเนี่ยทำยังไงของเราเนี่ยถึงจะมีรักษาจุดยืนของเราตรงนี้ไว้ได้ว่าเฮ้ยเราต้องพากลับมาให้โลกหันกลับมาอยู่ฝ่ายประชาธิปไตยให้ได้ อันนี้ก็เป็นบทบาทหนึ่งที่อยากจะฝากทางโฟกัสไว้ครับขอบคุณครับ
Okay, thank you so much, Baramee. And with that, we are opening the floor for a few questions. If you have a question, kindly address it to a specific person in our panel. We have time, Galil, no? 2 questions? Okay. So anyone from our audiences want to have additional interventions or questions? Boa. Okay, Boa, please. Do we have a mic here? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't know who should take this question between Henry and Peter, but it was on the like of course you were focusing on the land reform to its agrarian dimension. My question was, how do we understand the land question in the global south connected to the issue of sovereignty, beyond the agrarian, beyond food productivity, but connected to sovereignty and connected to the national question, in fact, right? How can we understand the land reform in that context beyond the agrarian?
This is for Henry, no? Henry? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Wow. We happen a long time not see directly. Yeah. I think for the agrarian reform and food sovereignty, yeah, our struggling, as Peter Rosset said, yeah, of course, as the continue as the alternative, yeah, and we have we can say result, yeah, in international level. They organized the ICAT 2006, yeah, International Conference on Agrarian Reform and Rural Development. And next year, they organized the ICAT again in the Colombia, yeah. And for the food sovereignty, we have strong a social movement. Just this month, yeah, we have organized the Nyeleni in the Sri Lanka. And the issue of the agrarian reform, food sovereignty, agroecology in the national policy. But the other side's the problem, yeah. Our enemy, they always making the, we can say the competition with us, making the how to make the stop our agenda. Yeah, like case in Sri Lanka, yeah, or in case in Indonesia. How the government Indonesia, they have commitment last period, yeah, on they will distribute 9 million hectare land, yeah, and 12 million hectare of the forest. But the transnational corporation and the corporation with the bureaucracy, they're trying to stop this program. Yeah. It is, I see the how the difficult we can say our enemy. And because that, I think, yeah, we must continue as the social movement, and of course in the political point too. But yeah, I think Peter Rosset has mentioned too. What happened in the Venezuela? Yeah, after our friend Maduro, now 10 years as the in the power, have implemented the agrarian reform, because we see he have full power for implement. And how now in the Colombia can the president now implement the agrarian reform? And I'm not, maybe not systematically, but I just remember, because that we must listen, yeah, in this century, yeah, any agrarian reform like implement in Zimbabwe, yeah, how the agrarian reform implement in Zimbabwe, and how the situation in rural area now after the agrarian reform in Zimbabwe, and different way, different step, yeah, methodology with the agrarian reform in the South Africa. And what's the political situation we need, and what the political what the political role model we need to make the agrarian reform implement in the new century. Yeah, if we say it's different with the on the 20th century. If we say the 21st century, what is it different with the 20th century? But as we must know, Zimbabwe is in the new century, in 21st century in the beginning. They implement 2001 of the Agrarian reform. Yeah. And now in international level instrument too, we have the UN ROC. Yeah. UN ROC can as the we can say the uh, instrument for us to legitimize, to making law in each country to implement agrarian reform, food sovereignty, agroecology, and rural development. Yeah, and how in each country we have the policy about that, and actually, yeah, the real in the politics when we have the policy, we have the plan. It's not reality implement. It is the I think the situation we see now in our movement. Thank you very much. Sorry if not directly to answer your question, my brother.
Thank you so much, Henry. Any additional questions from the floor? From Walden, to everyone. Okay. So everyone needs to answer? Okay. If you want to
actually
answer.
a question, just a comment on what our panelists have said. One is the issue of China has been raised, and I just wanted to say that over the last 6 years, Henry, focus has been keeping very close track of what's been happening within China as well as China's relationship to the world. And I think because many organizations had asked us to do studies, and we did on this. And I think we basically had the conclusion that China should not be compared as an imperialist power to the United States and Europe, but we were also warning that it could develop into an imperialist power if it did not change or address some of its policies. And so now, we are now in a situation where we have to continue asking that question, especially now that the United States is in a fighting retreat, because this is what Trump is all about. You know, it's a retreat of the United States. And is China filling that vacuum of being a hegemonic power? That needs to be studied very closely at this point. So I think that's the one thing that I just wanted to add to that question. Again, it's not a comment. The other thing is to Mayan, I think that as I said earlier to you, we must not underestimate the way that the fossil fuel industry continues to, really try to maintain its dominance when it comes to energy. And that's, I think that, in fact, under Trump, their position is that, well, if people want to keep on using combustion engines, we will continue to provide that, and we have supportive administrations all over. So I just wanted to say that that needs to be stressed even as we discuss the issue of green colonialism. But related to that is, it's not just the West and the electric vehicles, but China is now the largest producer of electric vehicles, And so it has, this has a major global impact in terms of assessing where China is in fact headed. So I just wanted to add those points as some things that Focus with its allies should be addressing within the next, 30 years.
Towards the next 30 years. Thank you, Walden. Are there any other questions from the floor? Then maybe I can do a quick summary, not yet a synthesis, Galil. No more questions? Okay. Thank you to all of our dear panelists. Here's my attempt to summarize what's been discussed, and my apologies in advance if I missed anything. So the panel highlighted ongoing struggles against corporate land monopolies across the region, particularly in southern Thailand, where communities are promoting agroecology as a strategy to reclaim land rights. Also, we identified how the green and climate discourse often provides cover for capitalist expansion in rural areas. Some of the key challenges discussed include governments across the political spectrum, left to right, fragmenting communities and leading to calls for autonomy from electoral politics and the state. The discussions also emphasized, sorry if I'm going too fast, you can. The discussion emphasized continuing support for agrarian struggles through new analysis of trade and the WTO, localization of the UN drop to regional to communities across the region, and strengthening grassroots organizations. The three central lessons that emerge from the discussions pertain to food systems that should be inherently political. Food sovereignty is essential for society's survival, and the commons that function as living institutions that face decimation when captured by external forces like transnational corporations. The panel stressed that the decision should remain in peasants' hands while highlighting, of course, women's struggles and their recognition. Current resistance efforts focus on the defense, from social movements, from the defense against land grabbing of forest resources, resisting corporate capture and large infrastructure projects like dams, fighting industrial-led economics through concessions, and basically countering neoliberalism. To this end, communities should be empowered to face also climate impacts while addressing peasant criminalization. Also in the panel, Thailand's democratic challenges are emerged, including the erosion of civic spaces and criminalization of dissent and rights defenders. We emphasize reclaiming land rights and people's power to define food sovereignty while resisting monopolization by corporation and other private entities. For Focus, international connections were identified as crucial for facilitating strategic exchanges between movements and countering neoliberalism while helping community voices reach an international space and national media, of course. The panel also questioned the current global dynamics, including Trump's tariffs and the concept of new global south, to which I think Focus can respond to in planning for the next 30 years. There are some concerns also raised about green energy, forest capture, carbon metrics, and Focus on the Global South should see itself, and the Global South should see itself as becoming a resource frontier from the Global North's clean energy transition, creating green sacrifice zones. Okay. Hence, with our continuing work and moving forward, the methodology for Focus must emphasize its role in accompanying movements rather than leading them, and with importance placed on political translation, storytelling, internationalism, of course. Lastly, Focus needs to help in decomplexifying the academic language and tearing down those language barriers between the academe and communities. and to promote broader accessibility of its analysis. And with that, thank you so much. Thank you to our panel, Peter, Picao, Mean, Bang Henry, and Baramee for joining us this morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, panel one, and we apologize that we simply don't have enough time for these rich conversations, but we need to move forward. Before we move forward, let me just remind you for the English listeners to kindly don't forget to return the interpretation device after panel one. We no longer need it for the succeeding panels. We still have 3 panels, but at this point, we would also like to acknowledge our online participants. This is a hybrid gathering, and we're also joined by comrades and fellow travelers in various people's struggles across the region and globally. So yeah, online Zoom participants, we hear you. And yeah, thank you for making the time and the effort to join us, even not physically. So at this point, we will also hear messages of solidarity from our brothers and sisters that was weaved together by our focus content creator and outreach coordinator, Anisa Widyasari. So before we go to the next panel, thank you.
Greetings. I am Robin Broad, a proud member of the Focus Board and someone who has followed Focus since even before its official birth. And I am truly sorry that I cannot be with you in person today. But I am with you, sitting here in my home, a block from Washington, D.C., which is now occupied by armed National Guard troops and unmarked ICE vehicles swooping down on protesters and people of color. And I am feeling grateful for the work of Focus and honored to be a part of Focus's global community. Here in the United States, we are witnessing an increasingly authoritarian White House with attempts to silence media such as The Nation, to silence progressive nonprofits as well as their donors, and attempts to silence the voice of academics who do not toe the Trump line. For 30 years, I have deeply appreciated how Focus has stood up to U.S. empire and to the rise of authoritarianism. Focus has inspired millions across the globe with its visionary analyses of the better world that our social movements can build. Now, in this current moment in history, I am feeling even more strongly the similarities between what we are experiencing in the United States and growing fascism across the world. From the Philippines, where I first lived and worked in Mindanao in 1977, to El Salvador, where I also work with grassroots communities fighting authoritarianism and development debacles. And so, dear friends, dear comrades, I salute Focus on the Global South on this 30th birthday anniversary, and I look forward to continuing to bring the voice of Focus into the belly of the beast, the heart of the monster, and I continue to look forward to learning from you and with you. So let me end with a toast to at least 30 more paradigm-transforming years of Focus on the Global South work.
Magandang hapon at ako si Leticio Datuata, isang tribal chief ng Team Justice and Governance na mula sa BARM na ang masasabi ko lang ay isa congratulations sa Focus at mabuhay sa kanilang 30th founding anniversary at nagagalak ako nagiging kabahagi ng kanilang journey, pagtulong sa mga campaign, sa mga katutubong mamamayan para sa right to self-determination.
My name is John Pfeffer, and I'm the Director of Foreign Policy and Focus at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C., and I want to congratulate Focus on the Global South on its 30th year anniversary. Focus is an extraordinary resource, a go-to source for research, activism, and inspiration. 30 years ago, Focus on the Global South was ahead of its time, and it remains indispensable today. I want to thank Focus for all of its work over these years, and I look forward to working with you over the next 30 years as well.
Happy 30th anniversary, Focus. On behalf of Project Savannah Southeast Asia, I'd like to offer our warmest congratulations on 3 decades of being a strong voice for social and environment justice. Our work in the Mekong region actually have grown right alongside you, from collaborating in Laos, in Cambodia, to launching the Mekong ASEAN Environmental Week since 2019. Thank you for keep walking and sharing the same stand. Looking ahead, we know that we will face a lot more complex issues, but let's keep working together to create more space for the community and the young people to lead the fight.
Congratulations to our comrades at Focus on the Global South. To us at FIAN, Focus is a true sister organization, united by our shared values of solidarity, justice, and the defense of human and people's rights. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for the often invisible work of caring for what keeps us together in our alliances and networks. I hold fond memories of our longest collaboration on land and agrarian reform, and of the communities that have hosted us on this joint journey to defend people's territories for life. In these challenging times, we celebrate not just your achievements, but your spirit, your critical thinking, deep roots in people's struggles, and loving companionship. This is the spirit that will see us through. Long live Focus on the Global South.
My name is Sophie Ogutu. I'm with the World March of Women in Kenya, and I also help to coordinate the African coordination. I'm really happy. I want to congratulate Focus on Global South. I am one of the beneficiaries of Focus. My first global transformation course, so I did it actually with Focus. And so forever I remember Walden Bello professor, and I want to congratulate everybody who was there, who took part, because that course built me. And that is what made me understand internationalism and solidarity to date. So today I'm here just to thank you and to appreciate you and to say that we have a lot of hope. We need more organizations like Focus, because if it were not for us opening this space, coming from a grassroots feminist point of view, being that grassroots woman, I would not have been able to be in such a high platform. The Eleni platform is a hope for us. We are here because we have a lot of hope. We know that all is not lost. A lot has happened. A lot has been extracted from us. Africa has been really destroyed, but we still have hope because of organization and connection and the community that we're building together, because together we shall rise. And we say we are in this until all women are free.
Magandang hapon, mabuhay, maligayang pagbati at pagpupugay sa Focus on the Global South ngayong ika-30 anibersaryo ng inyong organisasyon. Masaya at excited ang Alyansa Tigil Mina na naging bahagi ang isang partnership sa Focus on the Global South nitong maraming mga taon. Mahalaga para sa Alyansa Tigil Mina na mayroong isang regional at international na partner na tulad ng Focus on the Global South para nadadagdagan at napapalakas ang boses ng aming kampanya na galing naman sa mga grassroots. Bukod doon, malaki yung pakinabang ng ATM sa napakaraming mga studies, research at mga briefings na ginagawa ng Focus on the Global South. Malaki at malalim ang papel ng Focus on the Global South para maisulong yung alternatiba at kakaiba na sustainable development na pangarap ng marami. Napakabuti na nagkaroon ng partnership at sabay na tumuloy sa paglalakbay na ito ang ATM at ang focus on the Global South. Padayon.
It is 30 years that the collaboration between the social movements and focus on Global South is really commendable, because we people are fighting day-to-day life, but we are not aware of the policy matters coming through globally. But we, learning from them, gaining knowledge and the brain capacity that we are gaining through focus on Global South is commendable. And we want focus on Global South continue this struggle hand in hand with social movements, grassroots people, and people who are really necessary to fight knowledge with the policymakers, with the oppressors, with the corporates, with the UN bodies. So this is really appreciated. And we gain a lot of knowledge through the UN drop, and that is one of the areas that focus on Global South is having a deep knowledge, a deep capacity to disseminate this knowledge to other people in the world, especially to empower the social movement. So we congratulate for their 30th anniversary, which is really we expect in the 100 years to move.
ជំរាបសួរខ្ញុំឈ្មោះនំសុភ័ក្រជាអ្នកស្របួរនៅក្នុងក្រុមតន្ត្រីវិលំសាហកថា2ជាផ្នែកមួយនៃសុភ័ក្រស្រីក៏ជាសមាជិកនៅក្នុងក្រុម ALC ផងដែរខ្ញុំមកពីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាចូលរួមអបអរសាទរកម្មវិធីផ្ដោតលើខាងត្បូងចំពោះលទ្ធផលការងាររយៈពេល30ឆ្នាំដែលបានដើរតួនាទីយ៉ាងសំខាន់ក្នុងការចូលរួមចំណែកជួយដល់ប្រជាជននិងធ្វើឲ្យមានយុត្តិធម៌សង្គមការចងចាំដ៏ល្អមួយដែលខ្ញុំមិនអាចបំភ្លេចបាននៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ2018ដោយមានការគាំទ្រនិងសម្របខ្លួនពី Focus ដែលមានការរៀបចំកិច្ចប្រជុំជំនុំត្រែសៀនធ្វើឲ្យអំពីមានឱកាសនៅក្នុងការផ្សារភ្ជាប់ទំនាក់ទំនងជាមួយនឹងក្រុមសិល្បៈដែលមកពីបណ្ដាប្រទេសផ្សេង
Bahagi ang isang partnership sa focus.
Focus is beyond the focus ទាំងអស់ឲ្យមានសុខភាពល្អនិងជោគជ័យគ្រប់ភារកិច្ច
and good afternoon. My name is Chok Sophia and with Social Action for Community and Development Cambodia. Congratulations on your 30th anniversary. I recall when I first got to know Focus was during the campaigns against the World Trade Organization in 2005. I still remember the mass mobilization that you has contributed to make it happen in Hong Kong, but also in Bali and I believe in other parts of the world. Focus work has been very crucial in making this world a better world for every one of us, although the struggle is still on. Focus is beyond the resource organization. Focus is the ally and comrade to many of us here. We recognize, we admire, and we would like to thank your support always in terms of expertise, in terms of your support when we need the most, especially during the direct action that we took. We also would like to thank for the great job that you done in contribute to the analysis, exposing challenging but also opposing trade agreement, opposing emerging economic that place the corporate over the people. We thank you for that work and we hope and wish that Focus will continue to do your great and important thing on. With that, I would like to extend my gratitude and thank to all the work that you have done. Congratulations to Focus team. Thank you.
Thank you so much again to our brothers and sisters who have shared their solidarity message, and of course to Anisa for weaving these messages across the region. Before we go to panel 2, and before I forget again, we will have a solidarity dinner today at Chamchuri 1 at the M floor of Hotel Patung 1 Princess. You can take bus number 2, or we can walk together to the Solidarity dinner venue after our conference program today. So don't forget, everyone is invited to join and celebrate with us. We will continue hearing solidarity messages from our brothers and sisters and comrades. Sorry? Yes. Sorry. Patungwan Princess Hotel. Yeah. MBK, near MBK. Yeah. So, bus number 2 and 3. Yeah, okay. Kabang Kap. The bus stop is here. Yeah, thank you, Ed, for pointing out. So we will proceed with panel 2, Deglobalization and Globalization. I would like to call on the facilitator, our co-director, Joseph Purugganan.
Thank you, Galil. Thanks, everyone, at least those who are still here. As you will notice, a lot of the panels are actually related, no? And what's good about that is that we can easily segue into each of the panel, but at the same time, focus on very specific issues as well. So this is a conversation on globalization and deglobalization. Globalization, so the process of increasing interdependence of nation states through free flow of trade in goods and services, of finance and investments. It called for free trade and finance liberalization and the deregulation of economies. It is a process driven by corporate profitability. Many have referred to the 90s as the third phase of globalization, neoliberal globalization, which was marked by the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1995 as the foundation of the new multilateral rules-based governing global trade, rules-based system. This phase of globalization also saw the increasing emphasis on global value chains. Globalization promised economic growth and prosperity for all. The neoliberal orthodoxy was the only way forward, to follow the prescriptions of the Washington Consensus on fiscal discipline, on redirecting public spending away from subsidies towards public services like health and education, tax reform, market-determined interest rates, trade liberalization, of course, liberalization of foreign direct investments, privatization, deregulation, and securing property rights. Since its founding 30 years ago, Focus has been working side by side with people's movements to challenge and debunk these policy prescriptions and the assertion that all will benefit from them. We have done so in 4 main areas of work. First, unpacking the agenda and influencing the discourse. We've done analysis of the impacts of globalization, studies on the impacts on agriculture, how the influx of cheap, highly subsidized goods are killing farmers and fishers and decimating local agriculture, how the race to the bottom have depressed wages and impact workers' rights, and how these policies exacerbate the burdens borne by women. We also help to expose the undemocratic nature of the World Trade Organization. Our trade analyst Eileen Kwa and Fatumata Jawara's seminal book, Behind the Scenes at the WTO, exposed how the small green room processes define decision-making in the WTO. This lack of transparency and lopsided decision-making processes became a serious concern for poor and developing countries. We helped popularize the discourse. Focus produced explainer videos that explained why the WTO is bad for you, and the WTO Derailer's Guide. We also produced dossiers discussing our critique of export-driven agenda and exclusive economic zones. We facilitated collective analysis and agenda building through conferences and convenings, like the convenings on the Asian financial crisis, Understanding Global Finance Building, International Resilience Conference, and the Economic Sovereignty in a Globalizing World Conference as well in 1999. Second, Focus has done its work on globalization in terms of building the resistance. We are part of, and happy to be part of, and proud to be part of global and regional platforms and campaigns like Our World is Not for Sale, the Asia-Pacific Movement on Debt and Development, People's Movement on Debt and Development, 50 Years Enough Campaign, Social Movements for an Alternative Asia, Global Campaign to Dismantle Corporate Power, Asia Task Force on the Legally Binding Instrument, and the global platform that we are now part for social and ecological transformation. Aside from these global platforms, we've also endeavored to consolidate and to help form national level campaigns and actions, like the Stop the New Round Coalition in the Philippines, FTA Watch in Thailand, and the Forum on Trade Justice in India. We've also consolidated campaign strategies like the Derail the WTO and IMF Shrink or Sink campaign messages. And we've also spearheaded and participated in people's actions at the ministerial meetings of the WTO in Seattle, Cancun, Hong Kong, Geneva, and as well as the World Bank Spring meetings and ADB meetings. Third is in articulating and advancing an alternative. The primary alternative that we've been pushing for is, of course, deglobalization. As Walden pointed out, deglobalization is not a synonym for withdrawing from the world economy. It means a process of restructuring the world economic and political system so that the latter builds the capacity of local and national economies instead of degrading it. Deglobalization means the transformation of a global economy from one integrated around the needs of transnational corporations to one integrated around the needs of peoples, nations, and communities. Deglobalization emphasizes a number of key principles. Production for domestic market rather than production for export market. The principle of subsidiarity, production of goods at the level of community and at the national level. The use of trade policy for the protection of local economy and industrial policy, including subsidies, tariffs, and trade, should be used to revitalize and strengthen the manufacturing sector. The paradigm also pushed for long postponed measures of equitable income redistribution and land redistribution, de-emphasizing growth, emphasizing upgrading the quality of life. It pushed for a healthy balance that should be maintained between the country's carrying capacity and the size of its population. It advocated for a gender lens to be applied in all areas of decision-making, and the expansion of the scope of democratic decision-making throughout the economy. A clear pushback against the conventional thinking that economic decisions are best left to the market and to technocrats. Deglobalization also values the role of civil society to monitor and supervise and hold accountable the private sector. Aside from deglobalization, Focus continues to support as well the articulation of systemic alternatives like food sovereignty, and for example, the alternative trade framework that is being developed by La Via Campesina. And then finally, fourth area of work is in confronting the multilateral agenda and the reform agenda and the mainstream responses to the crisis, as well as deciphering through the chaos and uncertainties in order, as Peter mentioned earlier, to make sense of what's happening now in the Trumpian era. So we've confronted and challenged the reform agenda of the WTO and how these do not address the systemic issues and in fact perpetuates the failed and broken system, articulating the message that what we need is a transformation and not reform of the global economic system. So this is again panel 2 a conversation on globalization and deglobalization. And we've invited our friends, very close friends, to help us unpack, have a conversation, deep conversation on this topic. The following panelists, which I will introduce now, have been invited to lead this conversation on broad issues as well as to bring to the discussion particular issues from specific arenas of struggle. As I call them, I request that they go to the front in our little sofa sala set here for a discussion. Our first panelist is Julie Delos Reyes. Julie is an economic geographer. Let's give her a warm applause, please. And political ecologist whose research centers on the role of finance in socio-environmental processes. She is currently an assistant professor at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at the Hakubi Center for Advanced Research at Kyoto University, Japan. Julie's work examines the financial motives and practices that shape resource extraction, particularly in the mining and energy sectors. Her current research is concerned with understanding and mobilizing transition finance in ways that promote socio-ecologically just energy systems. Our second panelist is CP Chandrasekhar. CP? Is CP here? Chandru is the Global Director for Research and Policy of IDEAS, or the International Development Economics Associates. He is also a Senior Research Fellow at the Political Economy Research Institute, University of Massachusetts Amherst. He taught for more than 3 decades at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, where he held the Reserve Bank of India Chair on Banking and Finance and served as a Dean of the School of Social Sciences. He has published widely in academic journals and the mass media, and his most recent book is titled Karl Marx's Capital and the Present, 4 essays. Our next speaker who will join us online, is Anuka online already? Is Anuka Vimukthi de Silva. She's a small-scale farmer from Sri Lanka, associated with Monlar and a member of the International Coordinating Committee of La Via Campesina. She has been a strong voice within LVC's women's articulation and has played a key role in promoting youth leadership across the global peasant movement. In Sri Lanka, Anuka has actively contributed to the development of agroecology cooperatives with youth participation and has led several peasant-to-peasant training initiatives. She has also been a vital part of Monlar's campaigns addressing the debt crisis, working closely with members of women's collectives in Sri Lanka to push for stronger regulation of microfinance institutions. Welcome, Anuka. And then finally, we have Walden Bello. Walden is co-founder and chair of the board of Focus on the Global South. He's a retired professor at UP and the State University of New York at Binghamton, and author or co-author of 26 books, including Deglobalization, of course, Ideas for a New World Economy, Development Debacle, the World Bank in the Philippines, and most recently, Global Battlefields, My Close Encounters with Dictatorship, Capital, Empire, and Love. Again, a warm applause for our wonderful panel. So just to explain the mechanics of the panel, we will start with short introductory messages from all our panelists, giving their perspective on globalization policies and their impacts. And then what will follow will be a more interactive discussion among the panelists on some guide questions that I will pose as the moderator. So without further ado, let's start with Julie. Julie, please. Yeah.
Very small indeed.
Okay.
So good morning again, everyone. So for this panel, I was asked to make the interlinkages between globalization and mineral extraction. So let me just start by saying that energy and minerals have historically provided the material underpinnings of the global economy. They powered industrial production, enabled mass consumption, and sustained the infrastructures of trade and mobility that globalization itself depended upon. And their importance made access to and control of these resources a strategic concern of states. And it's instrumental to the prosperity of transnational corporations. In the mining sector, geographical expansion is a defining and permanent strategy. It's a sector that is premised on finite and geographically uneven reserves, which means search for new frontiers of extraction has always been central to sustaining and not growing production. So from the 1990s and onward, this expansion increasingly targeted previously marginal or stable territories in the global south, the so-called rising stars of the developing world, and this includes Peru, Chile, Ghana, Indonesia, Zambia, to name a few. This incorporation facilitated by a global policy architecture designed to liberalize investment regimes and reduce barriers to foreign capital. Free trade agreements, investment treaties played a critical role in opening up mineral sectors to foreign ownership, while global financial institutions made neoliberal reforms like privatization, fiscal discipline, deregulation, a condition for access to loans and development assistance. And these reforms dismantled long-standing mechanisms of state control, easing restrictions on foreign investment, and creating effectively an extractive space that is conducive for capital. So in that sense, globalization did not just sustain, but actually deepened the asymmetrical relationship between resource importing and resource exporting countries. TNC secured access to cheap resources, enabling an expansion, a dramatic expansion, in fact, during that period of productive capacity and profitability. And for resource-producing states, however, the integration into global markets exposed them more acutely to the volatility of commodity prices, demand shocks, and cyclical downturns. And these vulnerabilities were amplified by the financialization of the global economy. In the 1990s, the composition of stock markets underwent a significant transformation, becoming increasingly dominated by institutional investors. Their share of ownership in the largest 1,000 US corporations went from 12% in the 1960s, and in the 1990s it was something like 45%. By the late 2000s, this stood as high as 68%. So within corporations, including mining corporations, the investor base shifted towards these types of investors. And as a result of this, mining companies widely adopted the doctrine of shareholder value maximization, which legitimized the idea that companies are beholden to their shareholders as the primary owners of the company over other stakeholders. And this pushed them to align corporate strategies with the investment horizons of financial markets rather than, say, the long-term requirements of resource development or national economic planning. And this intensified the disruptions of the boom and bust period, periods of rapid expansion fueled by capital inflows and rising commodity prices that were followed by sharp contractions when investor sentiment shifted or prices collapse. And this is usually felt in terms of like closure, layoff, disinvestments, and it produced destabilizing effects macroeconomically and also social effects in resource-dependent economies. So this has been called the resource curse, wherein far from ensuring broad-based development, resource abundance ended up producing enclave economies that are characterized by low value addition, weak forward-backward linkages, and very limited diversification. Seeds of globalization remain visible today, as manifested in the persistence of export-oriented primary commodity economies in the global south around global value chains, that serve not only as mechanisms of resource transfer, but also structures that concentrate value capture, technological capacity, economic power in particular economies. Yet, that these arrangements are also being unsettled by the imperatives of climate change, the demands of the low-carbon transition, and intensifying geopolitical tensions. And these have particular implications for the Global South. And I think the task for us is to really assess the present moment and to think of strategies to tilt the balance in our favor. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie, for that introduction. Can we request Chandru to share your first?
For me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But first, of course, I must thank all of you for having invited me. I think it was in 1998 when my colleague Jayati and I were looking at the consequences or the sources and the consequences of the Southeast Asian financial crisis that Walden, having read a piece of ours, invited us to come to Southeast Asia, and that really changed the way in which we looked at a lot of things. So thank you to Walden, Global South, Shamali, and all of you. Okay, I just want to, Walden may not agree with me fully on this one, but I just want to introduce a note of caution when we overestimate the degree to which the movement towards deglobalization is happening. And the reason is because there is one aspect of globalization which all of us refer to, but perhaps don't place at the center to the degree that it should be done, which is that globalization fundamentally began as a process when deregulation of finance in the metropolitan centers of global capitalism combined with the decision of the United States government, because it had the exorbitant privilege of having the dollar as the world's reserve currency and it being as good as gold, decided to undertake these huge expenditures far in excess of what it could sustain, either in terms of its ability to earn foreign exchange through its exports or in terms of its ability to be able to mobilize resources domestically, to actually undertake these expenditures, behave as if there is no national budget constraint, resulting in a flood of dollars and capital into the international system. People, of course, talk about the role of the surpluses from the oil-producing countries, etc. But fundamentally, it was deregulation and the profligacy of the American state, facilitated by monetary policy, easy monetary policy, that led to this supply-side push of capital into the world system. Now, I think this actually underpins everything else. For example, you can't have trade liberalization unless you have access to international liquidity. If you're a country which actually is at the losing end of world trade, as much of the global south is, then what you would have is that if you actually try to liberalize your trade, if you remove import controls, reduce your tariffs, then what you're going to have is you're not going to be able, because the speed of adjustment of exports is not going to be the same as your imports, because you have wealthy people wanting to imitate the lifestyles of those in the metropolitan centers, you actually have very quickly a trade deficit, which is widening, a current account deficit, which is widening, and if you don't have the international liquidity to be able to finance it, you were dependent purely on the development aid network, the multilateral, bilateral sources of finance, which is completely determined on the basis of the political inclinations of the hegemonic countries, then you're not going to be able to finance that deficit. You'll have a balance of payments crisis and you'll have to pull back. So the only way in which you could have had a wave of trade liberalization is because of the fact that you had access created by the supply side push of yield-seeking capital from the metropolitan centers to the global south, that you actually had a situation when even the globalization that we know of could not have occurred unless you had that fundamental facilitating factor, which is the globalization of finance. And I think what really happened is, because of what was obviously a very important focus on the WTO, on the IMF, on the World Bank, and of course the other multilateral development banks like the Asian Development Bank, etc., we, to a certain extent, I think, underestimated the transformation which is occurring, which now with hindsight we see, which was the fact that it was not these institutions which now were going to be at the center of the imperial agenda. What is going to be at the center of the imperial agenda was the private institutions of finance, the private flow of capital into these countries in the form not of direct investment, not in the form of the offshoring which helped keep prices low and sort of help the great moderation, but really in terms of the flow of pure finance in order to be able to make returns. And I think if we take that into consideration, even if we look at what Trump is doing, I mean, he might be saying that I'm going to have tariffs, which means he's going to cut back on globalization through trade. Even if he says, I want my multinationals to come back to my country, which means he's trying to say that I'm going to reduce globalization through foreign direct investment, one thing he does not say is that I'm going to prevent finance from the metropolitan centers, particularly from the United States of America, to go and find its slots in the world system. That globalization is not under challenge, even under Trump. And that actually underpins all of the fragility that we have. Let us not forget that the first big crisis in the global south, the modern day crisis, was the 1982 debt crisis, which went on through the 1990s. The other big one was the miracle countries in 1997 going kaput because of their excess dependence on global finance. And today we know that there is, because of the supply side push, really domestic policy space in multiple ways. The ability of states in the global south to have a degree of autonomy and independence in order to pursue national development strategies gets completely undermined because of the legacy accumulation of foreign finance within their jurisdictions, within their borders, so that constantly states are looking, and in the developed countries as well, but states are looking at what would be the response of financial capital, because a quick move out of footloose financial capital can result in a situation where you can have a major crisis. So much so that even progressive forces, I mean, let's not forget what happened in Greece. You actually had a political party which was elected to power to actually break from globalization. But it couldn't. Oh, it chose not to. I wouldn't say it couldn't. So I would say that if really we want to push the agenda of deglobalization, and I would stop with that, that what is prime today is to find a strategy by which we can, one, ensure that states impose capital controls, because global finance is not going to retreat. You've got to prevent global finance from coming in order to create national domestic policy space. And when you do that, there would be a period of painful transition, and the deglobalization agenda must be an agenda which tries to build strategies to be able to address the pain which come when you have to necessarily, in order to pursue national development, you need to impose capital controls and keep footloose financial capital from crossing the economic borders of our countries. I think I'll stop there.
Thanks. Thank you, Chandru. So let's go to Walden. Walden, your initial introductory remarks on...
Yes. I think if we go back to the 1990s, we had this consensus among the economic elites, the political elites, and the intellectual elites of the global north, that globalization was the wave of the future. And this kind of conviction was expressed by people like Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, that said that anybody who opposed globalization, they were what he called flat earthers. That is, believers in a flat earth. Then you had The Economist, which is one of the prime voices of trade and financial globalization, identifying focus as having coined the word deglobalization, not because it thought we had a great idea, but to lampoon us. That these are people who want to go back to the Jurassic era. Okay, so that was sort of the atmosphere at the time. Now, when we in Focus came out with the concept of deglobalization, I think we felt that we had to pose a very radical position right there that would serve as a counterpole to this elite consensus. And Joseph did articulate some of the elements of deglobalization that we were pushing for, the importance of the internal economy, the importance of capital controls, the importance of policy space, the importance of not having this supreme organization called the WTO that fits every country, into which is slotted every country, and eliminates any sort of policy space for development. We articulated that over time. But the important thing right then is we have to oppose this vision and oppose it with a radical vision of deglobalization. So articulating the elements came over time. But it was important to have an active opposition from the very start. So that was how deglobalization emerged. And so what happened then was that the importance of action, which I did mention yesterday.
Yeah.
Before 1999, the collapse of the WTO ministerial, there were already evidence, UN studies and everything, that were showing that deglobalization was producing more poverty, more inequality, etc., but it wasn't getting through. The economics establishment, everybody, the World Economic Forum continued to sing the praises of globalization. And then Seattle happened. A ministerial collapses, 50,000 people on the streets, a police riot. And what happened was, suddenly, the policies of deglobalization were exposed. It was not because of intellectual debate, because those facts were already there. It was because of people getting to the streets, which is why in the fight against globalization, I would emphasize the importance of action. Action really creates reality. Action completes the truth. Getting to the truth is not just an intellectual process, it is a process of street fighting and struggle. And that's what Seattle really meant. And I think many of us throughout the world were part of that Seattle thing. So what happened after Seattle is that suddenly people like Joseph Stiglitz, Soros, what else? This guy in New York, Columbia University guy, Jeffrey Sachs. All of these people that, had not been questioning or were part of the, suddenly were coming over to our side. And it was great that they were coming over to our side, but nevertheless, I think what was important was action. Then what happened was different forces took up the cry of deglobalization. And so what we came up with was being appropriated even by the far right in Europe, in the United States, in the developing countries, and but using it for their own purposes. You know, we have to protect the national economy, but it is a national economy that benefits principally people that are white, that are, of the dominant culture, and that excludes people that don't look like us, like immigrants or people of color. So, also, there were many people in the United States, elsewhere, that were displaced by deglobalization, deindustrialization. Millions, the United States manufacturing jobs went from 19 million to around 12 million just in about, a few years. And there were so many of these people displaced that were looking for progressives to advocate their cause. Now, the problem is that the dominant social democratic and progressive parties in the North basically bought into globalization. That they became part of the intellectual and political consensus. So what of these people is when they no longer found a representative for their causes and they were suffering, they turned to the far right. And the far right was so smart that it was going to do whatever it wants, intellectually or politically, emotionally, to bring these people. And that's how, essentially, the working class was lost in the West. Whether in Europe, the United States, the Democratic Party. People remember that Hillary Clinton, she called the people who voted for Trump that were workers in the Midwest deplorables. What kind of response is that? No wonder they deserted the Democratic Party and went for Trump. Okay, so that's where we are right now, that Trump yesterday went in the United Nations. He attacked globalization. That's one thing. He said that, corporations are coming back to America, and that's happening, even if it's destroying their supply lines, because Trump is basically riding on popular anger. It's no longer any economic efficiency or but Apple said just recently, the guy who heads Apple, Tim Cook, says, the president wants more in America. We, Apple, also want more in America because the president says so. So now it's politics in command, the politics of rage, which is why deglobalization, is going to be with us for some time. My final point is, now that the right is embracing deglobalization, I think what is important is we need to distinguish our concept of deglobalization from that of Trump, which is ultra-protectionism, the idea of, the ethnic majority is the one that must enjoy the benefits of the national economy, this kind of trade wars, that's one deglobalization. What we have to now articulate is really a different form of globalization. We already said that part of that in the last few years, but we have to make that really a very important part of the debate that is going on. So that's where I think we're at now. It's not a question of whether globalization will come back. It's more, what kind of deglobalization? Do we want the Trump fascist kind, or do we want a much more progressive kind of deglobalization?
Okay. Thanks, Walden, just to go back to the question, the processes, no, like, so there was Shuttle, and then there was Doha, where they launched the Doha so-called development round. And then in 2003 was Cancun. And a farmer, Korean farmer, made an ultimate sacrifice, if you remember, Lee Kyung-hae made that ultimate sacrifice to dramatize the point that WTO kills farmers. So I think this is a good time to bring into the conversation Anuka from Sri Lanka. Hi, Anuka. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I hear me.
I'm encouraging you now, inviting you to share your thoughts to add to this conversation. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, a great panelist. I don't know how to speak because after the listening, all panelists is a great understanding how they know in the beginning with the globalization. That's why it's Lavia starting campaign. What Walden tell. We need to process and action more closely to understanding the globalization and their fascist process. That's how Lavia started the campaign. Like Joseph mentioned, what happened with the 2003 in Cancun with the Lee Kuan. He took his life in the WTO ministerial against to the trade policy. And I like to explain, giving some regards about the why Lavia starting point. Especially Lavia started as a global movement to resist and harmful effect of the globalization, which the push to the organization like the WTO, IMF, and World Bank. Because I like to explain also we are in Sri Lanka we are sitting in the real critical movement with the IMF because after 76 years we changed the regime, but the same way we are facing the huge crisis with the progressive government. What like Walden said, we still thinking what way we are moving with that kind of policies. That's why is in the like Walden mentioned, especially with the protest in the Seattle 1999, most recent mobilization in Geneva in 2022, Lavia has been forefront fighting the right of the farmers and rural communities against this kind of institute, because as a farmers in the ground, we know how the debt crisis result of the combination of high fluctuating cost of the essential food inputs like seed and fertilizer, voting the market price and the produce, and also that's also the how efficient affordable credit we are facing with that kind of international phase institute. One member of has led many protests in their own countries, challenging the demanding policies and their financial organization. We all know the problems in neoliberalization and also the FTAs and the WTO because that is the damaging they do our food system in the community. That is the clear idea, because with the trade agreement, they always killing the farmers' reality. That's how since 2022, Lavia has been calling for the real alternative current global trade system, especially with the agreement on the agriculture within WTO. We believe WTO not the right phase decisions about the agriculture. At the WTO ministerial in Geneva 2022, we publicly said we want to create new fair trade framework for the global trade based on the principles of the food sovereignty. That's why we're building new framework for the international agriculture trade based on food sovereignty. That's we are on the way to understanding how globalization killing the reality in the ground. That's why it's like over last 3 years, we have worked together with our members, all regions, developed this new framework, which we shared last month with our allies, including Focus. We think that is the way we can move forward with the understanding how we move forward with the understanding the reality. That's I want to tell here, and also especially thinking about how this movement remained up to the 1960 and 1970, when the G77 countries called the new International Economic Order, challenge the global economic system that benefit only the rich countries. We know what's happened with the G77 now, and also at the moment, NEO lost momentum because many countries of the global south were based on into the debt and trapped by the policies like structural adjustment program. These programs kept many countries circle poverty and dependence. Sri Lanka is the one of good example what happened with that kind of conditions, because we are in the 17th round of the IMF, and also we are totally trapped with the other countries debt, with the French club and also the China and the Japan, and now is like ADB playing big role. That's why we think it's like this is the because today the global south face 11 trillion debt, countries like Sri Lanka, and already struggling, as I mentioned, like that is the situation we are facing with the progressive government. We cannot move with the reality because of the trap. We cannot do anything with the IMF because, like Walden mentioned, like progressive government also stuck with the debt. I think especially on top of these, US and others using the tariff and other trade barriers push their own foreign policies, which is making things even harder than countries in the global south. Tariff and non-tariff barriers as a tool of able to protect our economies. Indeed, they are now being used by the small same colonized power, bullying us into the submissions. That's why I think also is the BRICS. We didn't have a good understanding how BRICS going to operate. That's I want to tell in here. That's why we are believing alternative trade framework based on the food sovereignty is the possible way to go with the decolonization.
Thank you, Anuka, for those initial comments. Before I open the floor for the open forum in the discussion, I just want to maybe get the viewpoints of our panelists precisely on the question, on the assertion of Walden that our current moment is now a question of whether we're talking about deglobalization of the right or deglobalization, progressive kind of deglobalization. Do you agree with that statement? Especially as you're working on very specific areas of or arenas of struggle, or do you see maybe a last ditch effort to save globalization, and maybe proposals for a middle ground, as usually happens when there are sort of extreme positions, and of course, Trump represents the extreme right position. No, so I just want to maybe trigger the debate and deepen the discussion. Just get your views on Walden's point about deglobalization. Julie?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with that there's really a strong impetus for protectionist policies kicking in the US, trying to force allies to move production, manufacturing facilities, and even explore for new sources within the United States. And, you know, this was not done before. Basically, the mining sector thrived on being able to, you know, profit from elsewhere because there's cheap labor, minerals, you know, they are far more abundant. And to be honest, I don't know how this would play out in the mineral sector because on the one hand, yes, there's that strong political push. But the reality too is that some of the minerals that are actually needed
in China
are highly concentrated in particular geographies, right? And then at the same time, refining is, you know, held by China.
Yeah.
And so I don't know to what extent is this protectionist policy going to be very effective. Also because you have built a system over decades that has been built on profitability concerns. And, you know, when those things start to bite, especially in in mining. It's just the reality that it will take more time to explore for those things in the United States because many of them don't want to do it in their backyards. This is also another reason why, for decades, we have come to depend on China because they didn't want to do it within the United States. So it was a comfortable setup for them.
Yeah.
And then I think when they talk about refining, creating a sort of, domestic capacity, we have to remember that even for China, it took about 3 decades of sustained capital investment in this sector for them to reach a point where they could refine like rare earth and all these other minerals. And it's really environmentally problematic too. So this was a cost that was also externalized to China. So, having set that up, and now you have these protectionist policies kicking in, you kind of see this sort of tension. So, I mean, it's still very much uncertain, but also I think it will be highly contested and also interesting to see how this unfolds.
Thanks. Chandru, what do you see are the manifestations of deglobalization in terms of global finance?
Well, let me put it this way. If you look at the Trump policy today, I mean, not the set of policies that he's pursuing, I think it's transactional, because what are these tariffs aimed at? Are these tariffs aimed at actually correcting the trade deficit which the United States has with a number of countries? It's really not going to work, as many people have argued. Or is it actually meant to mobilize resources to finance the big, beautiful budget bill, which has given these huge concessions to big capital in the United States, including, of course, to finance in the United States. So, it's you say that, okay, Europe has to fend for itself in terms of defense, but how are they supposed to do it? Put the money out and import from the United States. You're willing to talk to Russia so long as they're willing to give, so it's transactional. So in that context, I think, I think it's the right deglobalization, if you want to call it, is really an attempt to try and restructure globalization in the interests of American capital. And what we need is really a kind of deglobalization which actually allows other countries in a less hegemonic world to have domestic policy space, and that would be the progressive deglobalization that we have to speak of. But that's the big challenge. The big challenge is that once you decide to, in some sense, de-link from finance, you have to go through a process of actually reconstructing economic policy, and the transition is bound to be painful, and which is why the progressive forces, despite having an agenda of deglobalization, are finding it difficult to implement that.
Yeah. Before I call back Walden to maybe answer or respond to that, maybe Anuka, is Anuka there? Anuka, you mentioned a while ago the efforts of La Via Campesina to articulate an alternative framework, right? Do you want to expound a bit on that, and to what extent does that framework really advance the principles of deglobalization, the good kind of deglobalization?
Yes, I think yes, because of that is the idea of the alternative trade framework. We are trying to build based on the food sovereignty, because we believe how it's like that global pressure bring to the people's died. That's why we believe as a 3 major sectors we are talking about the alternative trade framework, a right to food sovereignty for all countries. We know how, like especially with the sanctions, how it's working against to the people's sovereignty, and how they are using power to build the food sanction against to the people's sovereignty, and also how they start the war using as a food as a weapon. Especially we know what happened with the Palestine. They using food as a weapon. That's how they destroy the people's sovereignty. That's why as a alternative trade framework, we are thinking about how we move forward with the main three sectors: right to food, right to food, save for all countries. And the second one, promoting international cooperation and solidarity, how we go with the unilateral, multilateral solution aimed to the excluding countries from the international trade agreement conditions, food stuff, and other things. And also how we build the good connection between the multilateral space to right to food, and also how human rights to support for the food sovereignty. And also the next one is the price. We know that's it's like a global campaign about the price for our own production. We know what's happening with the India and also the Europe, how it's getting hard to access the credit and also the minimum support price for the farmers. That's also we are talking about how currency, like Walden mentioned, how de-dollarization through the national sovereignty with the food production. That's the three major parts. We are talking about the alternative trade framework. That's the main pillars in the alternative trade framework.
Thanks, Anuka. Walden, you want to expound on the point about deglobalization of the right and the need to strengthen our articulation of and maybe add to that this question of China, which was also raised in the previous panel, no? Because I remember right after Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement, China was sort of positioning itself in trying to build alliances against Trump's policies, no? So I don't know how that would play out in the campaign ahead.
Okay, great. Just several things, on this. One is, I do not think we can underestimate the role in terms of destroying the hegemony of the United States and forcing the United States to focus more on the Western Hemisphere of the big defeat of the US in the Middle East. Because you do need, for an economic hegemon to be able to, in fact, dominate, you do need the military power. And I think that was, in terms of the globalization project being set back, I think the role of the resistance in the Middle East and globally is really important. Okay? So, but I will not go into the area of controversy by identifying those sources of resistance in the Middle East. Okay.
We know them.
The second thing that I do want to say is that what is central in the United States now is not, unit costs or the economics of efficiency. What is important in the United States now is the political rage of the mass base of Trump. And if Trump, can get away with all these crazy statements that are sometimes contradictory, it's because he's confident that that political base called MAGA, or Make America Great Again, that Hillary Clinton called the deplorables, is behind him 100%. So if we look at the decisions of transnationals, whether they're whether they're Apple or NVIDIA or Johnson & Johnson, they're all saying, oh my God, it's going to be very disruptive to move back to the United States because not only can we not find screws for computers because they're all in China, but the manufacturing know-how has been lost because that moved to other parts of the world. But they're saying we have no choice because Mr. Trump wants us there, so we have to be there. And so I think it's important to realize that it's now politics in command. And so I think we realize, at least with respect to the global north, that is that's going to be very central in this kind of thing. So I would say that we're going to see a combination of transactional things happening with ultranationalistic happening, with protectionist things happening, and of course, we still have to see that in the area of finance, as Chandru said. But this kind of politics is what is going to dominate in the next several decades, because I think Trump and the far right in Europe are all appealing to the destructiveness of neoliberalism to create a kind of domestic, hegemony. So, so I'm just saying that don't think it's now corporate efficiency that is in command. It's political rage. And this is why the Democrats are practically becoming extinct in the United States.
They don't have a response.
Because they don't know how to mobilize the people against Trump. And there's this New York Times piece about 2 months ago that shows that so many counties in the United States are just becoming red. And pretty soon the Democrats are going to be facing a real problem. So now, if the Democrats are facing a problem in the United States, that is also our problem at this point in time.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Walden. Now we open the floor for any comments or questions to continue the conversation. Yes, please. Microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to ask a question, I guess, primarily to Walden, but also maybe Anuka, if she's still there. And it's about this term, deglobalization. When I hear this, I wonder if it's the correct term to use or whether it's maybe a misnomer. Is it a useful term? Does it accurately describe what's happening and as progressives what we might want to happen? So like even if we kind of cast our minds back to, say, the ultra-globalization movement, Seattle and the like, that was never really against globalization per se. It was against neoliberal globalization, and it was for an alternative form of globalization. And I think some of the things that we've been hearing from like La Via Campesina, but also other comrades like Henry earlier, and Mary Ann, people here participating in this discussion today, this kind of internationalism of the peoples, that is also a form of globalization. Yeah, that's not deglobalization, it's an alternative form of globalization. So I wonder if, firstly, if it's saying that deglobalization is happening and saying that we want that to happen is not a sort of mischaracterization of what we actually want and of what's actually happening. Secondly, and related to that, I think maybe there's a danger of misequating a retreat of the United States into trade protectionism, misinterpreting that as a form of deglobalization, as opposed to masking a genuine globalization, right? The US is kind of retreating, maybe in terms of trade, but financially it's not. Yeah, that's still kind of globalized. And particularly here in the region, what we're dealing with now is no longer simply like the big Satan in Washington, right? It's kind of Beijing, it's kind of Tokyo, it's Israel, right? You kind of look next door in Myanmar. And one of the struggles for people there is to kind of maintain that interest from the West. And when revolutionaries have pushed out people like Total or Chevron, what you've got is the Chinese coming in. What you've got is the Japanese refusing to get out because they're worried about the Chinese. You've got the Russians coming in to kind of take over the Way Special Economic Zone. This is all over access to rare earths, over mega infrastructure projects. We've got Israel kind of joining the ADB and investing in the Philippines. That's globalization, that's not deglobalization. It's not US-led globalization, it's genuine globalization because it's the world participating in it and not just Washington. So those are the two questions, I guess, related to that question. Is it a misnomer? Is it a useful term in terms of what's happening and what we want to happen?
Okay.
Do we not want a different form of globalization?
Thanks for that. Maybe because we have limited time, I'll revert back to Walden and the panelists if they want to respond.
Well, I think I think deglobalization came from the left. And when we conceived it, it was not withdrawal from the international community. We said that we have to have a trading system that allows countries in the global south, to be able, in fact, to have sustainable development because they do have policy space that is not destroyed by financial liberalization or trade liberalization. That's, basically it was, that was what we had proposed. Now, of course, a lot of these forces of financial liberalization as well as the transnationals, were American, okay? So that's, but that's why I said that deglobalization was hijacked by the right. It was hijacked from the left by the right. So, which is why I think the challenge is bring back this concept of deglobalization. The left must be able to bring it back to its original roots, which is that we have to give people, countries of the global south the right to develop. We must give countries, the global south, the right to be able to create internal, domestic, progressive policies, that would respond to their people rather than the response to transnational and local elites. That's what we had from the very start. So I would not say it's a misnomer. It's a battle to bring back deglobalization to the left or to the progressive movement. The second thing, I think, and you're definitely right, now that we do have this, fighting retreat by the United States, because that's how I would characterize Trump, and this came up this morning, how do we then begin to characterize China? Okay? And there have been some people that have said that what's happening now is a fractured globalization with the United States on one side and China on another side, creating their own different supply chains and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. My sense, though, is that many countries in the global south, having experienced the globalization pushed by the North, are not going to just accept another hegemon. And we can see that in various places, of course. And for instance, I just want to give you an example. Brazil has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods just recently. Chile has done the same thing. South Africa has done the same thing. Now, of course, this is just at the level of industry. Huh? Mexico. But I think this just indicates that countries are not going to be easily swayed, either being pro-US or pro-China, but wanting to create their own independent paths. So I think that's really important to gather at this point. And my sense is that that this is, you know, it's several things going on at the same time. You have the United States on a fighting retreat. You have China asserting itself, and then you have countries in the global south, you know, learning from their past experience and not easily giving in to new hegemonies. But that's as far as I can answer your question at this point in time. Now, when you do come to specific countries like Myanmar, we have to be very clear on what's happening there. That, you know, the Chinese are not playing a positive role in Myanmar and should be criticized for that. Or when it comes to the South China Sea, a country, you know, we have the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Seas, and China cannot just say, hey, we own 90% of this. You know, that's bullshit, okay? and the Chinese must be called on that, because if you don't call them on that, then they will develop to be an imperial hegemon. So it's very important that even as we appreciate, as somebody said, the progressive, the progressive aspects of what China has done, I think it is our responsibility to also be able to criticize it so that it does not go fully into the imperial path.
Yeah. Thanks. So we actually have two questions from our online participants. One is from Henry Saragih on BRICS, which I think you've already touched.
Can I just make
sorry. Go ahead, Chandru.
Just thinking aloud, you know, I suppose finally maybe the question is, do we see ourselves as continuing to live in a world of nation states? Because, you know, culture, you know, belonging, etc. is so important that this whole idea that we can have one world government is not something which, at least I don't see it in the foreseeable future. In which case, globalization is a process which integrates economically through various mechanisms which undermines the ability of a nation state to pursue a sovereign strategy. That is globalization. So if we define it like that there is a kind of integration which is determined by corporate capital and finance capital, then we need deglobalization.
Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, please, go ahead. Yeah. I'll go back to, I'm trying to manage that. We have, because we only have 10 minutes, but I want to, it's an interesting conversation, so we want to get all the views.
So I think when it comes to the climate crisis, we really have to think about how do we cooperate beyond nation states, and it's really important to think about it in these terms. And we have to also acknowledge the fact that because of globalization, we have varying capacities, industrial capacities, financial capacities, resource endowments, social-political structures in place that will have an implication on how we coordinate ourselves in terms of where money goes, in terms of investments, how do we assess which infrastructures are we going to fund, and it has to also proceed at a pace and scale that is consistent with net zero targets. So I think this is a clear reason as to why we should also be thinking collectively across countries, recognizing our different capacities. And I think this is the problem with globalization, because it basically ignored those different capacities. So I think that international cooperation would have to foreground those and try to think, you know, how do you transfer, say, how do you try to help Southeast Asian economies, for example, to transition when, you know, for the past decades, they've basically lost the, you know, policy autonomy to pursue industrial policy, to actually have the technological capacity to implement renewable energy deployment at scale. And this is a region that would really benefit the most from decarbonization, because it's the one region where emissions from electricity generation are expected to jump over the next 3 decades. So it's an important geography, but this is also the one that had the least to do with the climate crisis. So I think if we think of a kind of international cooperation that tries to basically mitigate those differences, I think this would be, for me, like deglobalization, but on a different term.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Anuka, you wanted to jump in.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I think I'm agree with what ask about the why it's like alternative globalization, because as a Lavia we believe globalize struggle, globalize hope. That's the main pillar with us as a Lavia. That's why we believe like we need to strengthen with the all global movement come together. That's why it's like last week we meet as all social movements in process of the Nalini. We believe convergence. That's how we believe we need to be globalized struggle. We need to come together as a unity of our diversities. We know that is the way of struggling, what Walden said. We need to build the actions in the global level. That's why Lavia believe it's like an alternative. Yes, it's like alternative for the globalization, but build the globalized movements to come together to build the food sovereignty, like we call sow unity, grow solidarity, and harvest the food sovereignty until the systemic transformation. That's the way we can change these narratives, political narratives from the movements. We need to be strong in the global level. We cannot fight alone in the all multilateral spaces. That's why we need to come together as all allies. That's why focus playing crucial role with the Lavia Campesina. And not only that, that's why we're building convergence through the Nalini process to overcome with these hardships. That's what I want to tell in here.
Yeah, thanks, Anuka. I'd like to use the last 5 minutes to go back to the panel, and maybe if you can weave into your final messages a response to a question from Manahan about what would a people-centered, life-affirming deglobalization that takes into account the planetary boundaries look like? And from me, what would it take to push the agenda towards a more transformative global economic system? So maybe 1 minute each. No. Yep.
Yeah, it is. No, they are very big questions, but let me put it this way. As I said, that there's a difference between cooperation, where nation states, on the basis of their own sovereignty and independence, decide to cooperate with another nation state, and a process called globalization. And I would still say that really any people-centric process would have to be based on having a state which has the capacity to be able to deliver to its people universal health, education, etc., etc. So that's the way I would look at it.
Thanks.
No, I think I would agree with that, it's globalization for me is not synonymous with international cooperation. Globalization is a particular formula that led us precisely to this kind of disaster. So I think veering away from that path, dismantling the architectures that are still there. In mining, the ISDS is still a very potent mechanism. In the past 10 years, they've been suing developing countries left and right, and they've managed to get a lot of compensation for that. And it's not a coincidence that this is happening now, when many of these transnational corporations are also venturing into new territories, where, as one of my interviewees said, the prospect of losing it all is high. So basically, ISDS really helps mitigate some of those risks and ensure that they get their money back, just in case countries somehow decide that they have to stop the mining project because of protests, and that really cripples the autonomy of states and their capacity to keep corporations in check. Secondly, I think we raised the question of China several times here. And there are also studies in mining that tries to differentiate private capital and the alignment of the state capital and commercial considerations as embodied in state-owned enterprises. So we did a lot of work on corporations. And I think we need to, nuance this a little bit now, because in the mining sector, it's really state-owned enterprises that are quite at the forefront of this. And, C.K. Lee, scholar C.K. Lee, who wrote the book on Spectre of Capital, argues that there's a difference in terms of strategies. And part of this reason is also, part of this has to do with the fact that state-owned enterprises are not just assessing their investments on the basis of profitability, but are aligning their strategies to the strategic interests of China. And that allows them to, invest in particular places where many, private transnational corporations are not willing to venture. So in that sense, in our campaigns, that seems to show perhaps we need to think of, how those differences might play out in terms of what socio-ecological regimes they generate in those places where they operate. We also need to keep China in check, but at the same time, there are also concrete opportunities and risks that are attached, to those types of investments. And also, C.K. Lee argued there are certain types of accommodations that Chinese firms are able to make that, say, private firms are not able to. So there's a lot of work for focus over the next 3 years.
I'm getting it, Walden?
Well, it looks like Julie has to be part of the People's Diplomacy Corps. I just wanted to say that that it's great that Anup Sukurman is right here. He's one of our old alumni. Please stand up, Anup. But what I would just like to say is, coming back to both what Julie and we cannot dissociate international relations among nation states from relations among classes within countries. And this is precisely one of the problems with the BRICS at this point. That the BRICS is a mixed group, but quite a number of dominant countries pushing the BRICS are not exactly models of democracy, especially those that own the most money in sovereign wealth funds like the United Arab Republic, Emirates, or Saudi Arabia, where some of the people joining BRICS are looking for development aid. So I don't think that you can dissociate the way that they will want the BRICS to develop from their internal structures. So the second thing is, I think that from the very beginning, and this goes to Chandra's point, when we articulated deglobalization, we were basically fighting against the way that corporations, financial and transnational, had destroyed local internal economies. And that deglobalization was an articulation of making those internal domestic economies, which are contained within nation states, again, vibrant economies. And so I think that was really what we were saying, both democracy and policy space, and the international and the local, these are very important to bring together.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would say, and of course, that should be the basis of cooperation, ideally among democratic states. The only thing that I would say at this point is, this year, we were celebrating 70 years of Bandung. Now, Bandung, we know, was essentially an anti-colonial document, an anti-colonial meeting. And so, and it's right that we celebrate the fact that it was a major anti-colonial push. But I think, as Shal and I wrote recently, if you look at the 10 demands of Bandung, number one was respect for universal human rights. And I think we must not forget that, because now that we look at these different formations like the BRICS, we should judge them by, among other things, are they respecting universal human rights as defined by the United Nations in the post-war period, which were very comprehensive. So many of the BRICS and the authoritarian states would like us to forget that this was the number one demand of Bandung. And we must not let them we must not allow them to forget that. So I would just saying is that anti-colonialism and the fight for democracy are really linked together in a very organic way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walden. Anuka, we'll end with you. Your thoughts and responses, please.
Yes, I'm agree with everyone. Like especially, we think as a La Via Campesina, we need to build the unity among the all social movements, and also we need real good support from the allies as Poggers also, because it's like it's not the easy struggle, because we need to move forward with the all together. That's why we can go with our struggle, dismantle the power from our enemies. That's why we believe convergence and build unity with the global struggle, globalized hub.
Thank you, Anuka. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all our panelists. Thanks, everyone, for the discussion. And apologies for taking up some time of the lunch break. Okay.